Three, two, one. Why did it change my background? That's so dumb. TikTok is so dumb, man. Turning this off. Turn it off. Go away. Go away. Oh, come on. Goink. Goink. It's so... TikTok is so dumb, dude. TikTok is so dumb. I'm trying to do something here, and I had it all set up, ready to go, and now I'm doing this instead of doing what I'm supposed to do with you guys. Hope you guys are all doing well out there. This ridiculous nonsense. Gotta do what we gotta do, though, right? Gotta do what we gotta do to try to make everything friggin' work, right? Couldn't just take all of these social media apps and put them on one thing, right? That's too much to ask for, right? Here we go. Marxism is evil, says Dog. No, you're explicitly wrong. Objectively incorrect. Objectively incorrect, dude. Take a look at what the Chinese are doing with Marxist principles. They've lifted 800 million people out of poverty. It's a pretty embarrassing position, dude. Straight up. What? Why? Why is Marxism not evil? Because all Marxism is an economic analysis of capitalism. It's primarily a critique of capitalism, and countries around the world are trying to move away. Oh my god, Dog. No, dude, if you're starting the conversation this way, dude, it's pretty hard to take you seriously, honestly. It's pretty hard to take you seriously, bud. You think the Chinese are the problem, right? Your own country, the capitalist society of America, is engaged in war across the world. Major, significant, open warfare. Open massacres, the CIA literally walking around death squads in societies, right? And you're complaining about the Chinese? I don't think I could take that position very seriously, dude. It's not a good open for you, bud. Not a good open. No. No, bud. Dog, man, what are you doing, bud? What are you doing? It just feels like you watched some Ben Shapiro or something, or some Steven Crowder. Not even that, Matt Walsh. You know? It feels like you're coming in here after watching one Matt Walsh clip, and that's the level that you're bringing into the conversation. Anarchism is the only answer. I'll say over and over again, right, that my only I like anarchists. Anytime I get talking with anarchists, I find myself nodding a lot and being yep, good point. Yep, I agree. The only trouble I have, and there are anarchists who come into this stream all the time, right? That the trouble I have with the anarchists is that they don't really want to rudder up to the reality of American imperialism. That it's all well and good to say we want a horizontal structure and we want there to be no centralized government and centralized control is the problem and all of this kind of stuff. That's all well and good, but you need a centralized, powerful bureaucracy, highly militant, in order to face up against the overwhelming power and strength of the United States military. And if you don't have that, then your anarchist society will be blown away. And that's the long and short of it. That you can talk about your anarchist principles all you like and have your theory all you want, but at the end of the day, if the Americans are just going to roll tanks and drop bombs on it, it's not going to do much. It's not going to achieve much. And that's where I tend to take a look at what the communists have managed to achieve. Right? Good evening to you, Serge. Good evening. Hope you're doing well, bud. Hope you're doing well. For those of you on TikTok, I hope you guys are all doing well out there. We're having a good one. There's actually good news on the horizon in some of these articles and links. Today we'll be talking about some of that good news. Yeah, but yeah, Dog, exactly. Anarchism can't even exist until all states are subverted economically and technologically. Yeah. So, it's kind of a fantasy from the beginning. Good evening, that guy. How you doing? Radio, good to see you. Conton, an absolute pleasure to see you. Anarchism doesn't fall to imperialism because anarchism can't be defined by territory or border. I mean, okay, bud. Like, I just feel like you're living in kind of a dream world. Like, I feel like, why is that a fantasy? Like, do you think the American military gives a shit that you're standing there being like, we're not defined by a territory or a border? Like, they're going to roll their tanks over your body. They are going to crush your bones and blow up your houses and and burn down your villages. Like, I don't understand, it just seems to me like whenever I get talking with anarchists about this kind of stuff, it's like they refuse to acknowledge the existence of American imperialism. Like, you can have whatever ideology you want, but it's going to fall apart the minute a tank rolls through it. Like, Compton. That's why I value you here, bud. You're so important to me because you're like the little under voice. Right? Compton said, I took so much damage to my HP for that statement. That was critical damage. Goddamn. Yeah. I feel you, Compton. Like, it's just like, like, more and more we're seeing pretty clear examples, right? And it's coming from quite a few sides that there are flat earthers in the conversations, guys. Like, there's nothing we can do about it, right? Like, people will just take a look at evidence and facts and just put these things aside in favor of their weird little idea, right? And people do it all the time. They don't want to admit things that are directly in front of them. Like, there are people in the world who can be shown a picture of the Earth being round and see satellites going around the Earth and see every other planet that is round and see the mathematics of the curved Earth and literally be shown empirical evidence directly showing you the Earth is in fact round, and they're still just like, no, it's big globe. It's big globe trying to sell globes to children. Like there's a winner in the conversation. And like these people, these types of mindsets and these types of people are in every conversation. They just have decided that this is how the world is. They don't want to actually be met with real actual evidence and would prefer to double down on this sort of, ideology. And it's all well and good to talk about like horizontal decentralized organization. Like, that's something I find myself being like, yeah, in like in a perfect world where like we all things were working out, that's a great idea. The American military will roll over it easily. They've done it before. They'll do it again. Like, you need a powerful, centralized bureaucracy that is highly militant and well armed. You need it. And if you don't want to admit that, then that's the end of the conversation as far as I'm concerned. Like, we don't need to move forward. Like, yes, you do. The Americans have proven time and time and time and time and time and time again that they are more than willing to send thousands of well-armed psychopaths into your country, burn down your infrastructure, murder your families, destroy everything, steal as many resources as possible, and then turn around and blame communism for it. Like, over and over and over again they have done this. And if you don't want to admit it, then I don't think you're a serious person. Like really, I just don't think you're a serious person. Yeah, I'm like here's this flat earth stuff. Horizontal and decentralized organizational models already exist. The American military isn't going to roll over it because anarchism isn't concerned with physical conflict with the state. Because it's what the anarchists want that matters. Like, yeah, like it's going to get rolled over, and like. I've never seen an argument that is at all even remotely convincing that tells me that that's not exactly and precisely what happens. Yeah, I don't see anarchists effectively dealing with Nazis. The This is the hard reality, right? This is the position the Soviet Union found itself in. This is the position that today's modern China finds itself in, right? Like, it's a lovely thought, dog. It's a lovely thought, I wish it were true. I wish it were so, right? I wish it could be the case, right? But Cotton says you don't need to worry about reactionaries. I'm giving the nerds wedgies. It's on site. Good thing, Cotton. Thank God. Thank God you're here giving people wedgies. Yeah, I mean, and this is why I don't really want to, like, blow up Dog's position at all. Like, because, I feel like anarchists and communists have more in common, right? Like, I assume, Dog, that you're interested in people people having homes, right? Eliminating homelessness, right? Like, I find that anarchists are genuine in their concern for the well-being of people and believe very strongly that this is something that we could pursue, and we could pursue this idea, and everyone would be better off for it in a genuine and serious way. And I admire that in anarchists, that there is this desire to ensure that everyone has Dog the centrist that everyone has access to resources. Like that to me is something that I can definitely get on board with. I think that the major disagreement is just, what is the process of that? How do you get from here to there? And I often find that anarchists don't really think that through. They don't really think, how do you get to there, right? Like, they create this idea, they create this larger concept of what it is, and they don't really think to themselves, well, how do we actually get to doing that? How do we... It's all well and good to say we're not concerned with the power of the state, but the power of the state is 100% concerned with you. And you can go and live on anarchist principles all you want, but you simply can't ignore the power that the state represents. And you simply can't decide to try to not interact with it. Like, it's going to interact with you. It's going to do so, and it's going to do so in very serious ways. And the only reliable way... This is why the revolutions that have been successful have been communist revolutions, right? There's not that many examples of anarchist revolutions that have been very successful, because if your whole idea is just ignore the power of the state, well, the state's just going to, it's not going to ignore you, and it's going to do what it needs to do to maintain its own power. Yeah, the process of it is counter-economics. My stance as an anarchist is praxis-based, practice-based, and it's de-abstract approach to social change. Revolutions aren't successful. There's many examples of successful revolutions because they're trying to overpower the state. Yeah, and they do. And they do. Like Mao's revolution, like the revolutionist China, the communist revolution in China was successful. There's this really great Michael Parenti quote where Michael Parenti says, it seems that American leftists are in support of every revolution except the ones that are successful. And okay, like, this is what, dog, dude, this is kind of what I'm talking about when I'm talking about flat earther stuff. It's like, okay, like, facts and evidence and what's happening in the world aren't relevant to your ideology, right? So just you focus on your ideology. The rest of us are going to take a look at what's going on in the world. Like, that's just the hard truth. Speaking of things that are going on in the world, here is Doja Cat wearing 30,000 hand-applied Swarovski crystals at Paris Fashion Week, right? I don't have an ideology. Yeah, classic. Doja Cat wears 30,000 hand-applied Swarovski crystals at Paris Fashion Week. The a comparison to Hunger Games is right in front of we live in the Hunger Games. Yeah, so my chat immediately starts saying we live in the Hunger Games. Yeah, you must first overcome the tyranny of bedtimes, and the Doja Cat wearing these crystals. Like, how much are these crystals? Like, what is the value of this? Do you think? Like, wearing all of these and like very specifically hand applied, like all of this. It's extravagant, grotesque wealth displays of wealth like this that just continue to continue to convince me, certainly, that the system of capital is a failure. It's just a total system. It's just a total failure. Like, why is it that a single individual gets to waste this kind of wealth for what amounts to be a fashion shoot, right? As spectacular as it may be, it is a spectacle without a doubt. But I mean, this is like a person's house. This is enough wealth to actually provide something real and tangible for someone, right? And why are we actually even permitting this? And then glorifying it, and then elevating it as if it's like, oh wow, did you hear what Doja Cat did? Like, why isn't it Doja Cat buys 5 families' houses, right? Why is that something that's not like venerated? Why am I not hearing stories like that? Bill Gates buys 1,000 people houses. Like, people like Gates and Musk and these guys, they could resolve the homelessness crisis, and they could almost do it on accident. They wouldn't even really need to plan it. They'd literally just need to turn to one of their assistants and be like, I don't want homelessness in my state. And that'd be it. The problem will be solved, and it would be quick. Because what the assistant would do is they'd be like, oh, well, then we'll just buy those people houses, and the story's over. Right? Like, the story's fucking over. Like... And, okay, let's move on to some of the news of the day. Yeah. From the Toronto Star, hundreds of thousands of jobs at risk if Bank of Canada raises key rate for 8th time Wednesday, economists warn. Another rate hike from the Bank of Canada this week risks pushing the Canadian economy into a deep recession that could cost hundreds of thousands of people their jobs. A growing number of economists worry. The bank is set to announce Wednesday morning whether it will be raising its key overnight lending rate for the 8th straight time, and markets are already pricing in a 25 basis point hike. That increase, said economist Jim Stanford, would be a grievous mistake for a simple reason. The economy still hasn't felt the full impact of the 7 rate hikes in 2022 and is already struggling. I'm still convinced we're likely facing a recession this year, and it will be all the deeper if the Bank of Canada continues this single-minded crusade, said Stanford, chief economist at the Centre for Future Work. Even if they don't raise rates, we're going to see increasing slowdown from the rate increases that are already in the pipeline. My little dog needs to be involved. My little guy needs to be involved. We're having very, very serious conversations. Yes, we are. We're having very serious conversations about anarchism in the chat, about the Bank of Canada raising interest rates. That's definitely happening. And my little dog is just like, no, Jonathan, you must cease having all of this conversation. These conversations about the Bank of Canada... Boom, 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 boom. Milo must be involved. How involved is Milo? How involved is he? Fairly involved. Fairly involved. That's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. In an attempt to get inflation under control, the bank raised the overnight lending rate 7 times in 2022, most recently pumping it by 50 basis points to 4.25% in early December. The overnight rate began last year at 0.25%, where it had been since the bank dropped it 3 times in 1 month in March 2021, as the global COVID-19 pandemic was declared. The theory is that by making it more costly to borrow money, people will spend less, eventually driving prices down. But lower spending by consumers means fewer customers and lower revenue for business, who in turn could end up having to cut jobs. Like, listen to them just say this stuff, right? Listen to them just say it. And then, like, really let it ring in your ear, right? Really let it sing in your ear in a special kind of way. The theory is that by making it more costly to borrow money, people will spend less, eventually driving prices down. So instead of saying, hey, wait a minute, there are these rich psychopaths at the top that are obviously extracting as much wealth out of the society as they can get away with, and maybe we should do something to prevent that process from happening. Instead of that, we're going to make life much harder for the poor. We're going to essentially make life so much more difficult for the poor and the needy and the working class, in the hopes that that is what will drive prices down. When what we should be doing is going to people like Galen Weston and saying, hey, drop your prices. Straight up, we could just nationalize you. Like, we should nationalize, like, all of Galen Weston's holdings. Like, I don't understand why we think having our food distribution system be privatized is a good idea. I don't think why is it useful to have this, like, worthless capitalist wedged between the process of food production and food distribution? Like, why is there this person who's just siphoning billions of dollars into offshore accounts and then going and hanging out at, like, Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile island? Like, why do we actually think that this is a good idea? Right? Like, why do we think that this is a good idea? And the only solution that they're actually presenting to us is, oh, we'll just make it so that no one can buy anything. We'll make it so that everything is so much worse for the society that the society overall will fall into a decline. And that will mean that the rich will be incentivized to lower their prices, except they won't. Like, they just won't. Right? Like, there will just come a point where the rich will be like, oh, I guess we've just extracted all the wealth we possibly can out of this place. Let's leave. Right? They're not gonna stay in the society. They're not gonna just stick around and be like, oh, I guess we'll just keep operating, then lower our prices and lower profit margins, all that. Like, that's not how it's gonna work. Like, these people will just leave, like they did to Detroit. Right? People will just leave. The capitalists will just abandon societies. They will just abandon places. Like, America, we literally watched America de-industrialize in front of our eyes. We literally watched America de-industrialize in front of our eyes. My entire life has been a process of watching America de-industrialize, and for some reason we think that other, like, corporations and companies won't do the same thing. I know, buddy. I know. What an exciting time to be alive, eh? What an exciting and strange time to be alive, where capitalists are outright telling us to our faces that their strategy is to make us spend less so that we'll drive prices down. And then admit openly, right in front of your face, but lower spending by consumers means fewer customers and lower revenues for businesses, who in turn could end up having to cut jobs. So they're outright saying to your face over and over and over again, we're going to make people homeless. We're going to render large groups of the populace homeless and impoverish huge groups of the populace. And we're doing that in the hopes that this is the way that inflation will come under control. Instead of saying, like, no, it's your stupid profits, it's your corporate profits that are obviously the responsibility, right? Here I have an article from Center for Future Work. Profits, not wages, have driven Canadian inflation. Every January, the Globe and Mail newspaper publishes a fascinating set of charts prepared by Canadian economists with their insights into economic trends likely to shape the following year. Center for Future Work Director Jim Stanford was invited again to participate in the collection. He submitted the following chart and text highlighting the dramatic increases in corporate profits in Canada that have been the dominant distributional outcome of recent inflation. In recent months, the Bank of Canada has focused on the labor market as the main culprit behind higher inflation. The unemployment rate is too low, wages are rising too fast, and this so-called overheating is driving up prices. This echoes conventional fears of a wage-price spiral like the one in the 1970s, but empirical evidence suggests wages have lagged inflation, not caused it, by an average of 2.5 percentage points per year since early 2021. However, another component of production costs, profits, has grown much faster and further, and hence is more culpable in explaining the inflation surge. Corporate profits have swelled dramatically during the pandemic to the highest share of GDP in history, and those profits are concentrated in the same industries that lead inflation: petroleum, real estate, building materials, car dealers, and yes, supermarkets. Let's define unit profit cost as the amount of corporate profit built into each dollar of real output produced in the economy. Unit profit cost has soared almost 50% since 2019. Unit labor costs grew 1/3 as fast. So instead of targeting workers with anti-inflation medicine, we might consider why profits have grown so substantially and find ways to short-circuit the profit price spiral that is fueling current inflation. The leading role of corporate profits in driving inflation is further confirmed by the close correlation between the rise in unit profit cost and the corresponding trend in inflation. Early in the pandemic, with production suppressed by health restrictions, profits plunged, and consumers' prices actually declined for several months, a phenomenon called deflation. Later, the global economy reopened, but supplies in several industries were still constrained by transportation disruption and energy price shocks. Companies in strategic sectors took advantage of the combination of pent-up consumer demand and pinched supply chains to increase prices quickly, and profits surged dramatically. More recently, in the latter part of 2022, those supply and energy price shocks abated considerably. Profits fell, and so did prices. Further stabilization of global supply chains and moderation in energy prices will result in further easing of inflationary pressures. Efforts by central banks to achieve a faster reduction in inflation through deliberate restrictions on economic growth and employment are not necessary and will impose large and lasting consequences on workers who have been the victims of inflation, not its cause. For a more detailed evidence on the role of record profits in 15 strategic sectors in driving the overall rise in prices, please see our recent paper, 15 Super Profitable Industries Fuel Canada's Inflation. I don't know why this is actually so difficult for us to understand. Right? I don't know why this is so difficult for us to understand. Corporations raise prices, profits go up. Have you noticed how their profits are going up and prices are also going up? These two are obviously linked. It's obviously linked. And we're just acting as though that's just not the case whatsoever. If I got TikTok, they're right here. Hi TikTok, how you guys doing? Hope you're doing really well. I know, right? I also have a beard and hair. Yeah, I know, right? Also with a beard and hair and glasses, I'm exactly the same as Ronnie McNutt. Wherever you are, Ronnie McNutt. Oh, Ronnie McNutt, you're a hell of a guy. Etc. and so on. I need to make a song called The Ballad of Ronnie McNutt. The Ballad of Ronnie McNutt, and have like a bunch of people go hum bum 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 bum. Because near as I can tell, Ronnie McNutt was a good man, right? Ronnie McNutt was a good man, near as I can tell, right? Anytime I've seen him say anything, do anything, be anything, right? He seemed like a good man who's trying his best and working his hardest. And if it is my fate that people come in here and say to themselves, "Oh, hey, this guy looks like Ronnie McNutt. I'm going to talk about Ronnie McNutt." So be it. Ronnie lives on. Ronnie lives on, and I have no problem with that whatsoever. Whoop! Oh dear! Oh dear! What's going on in the chat? Yeah, I'll gladly help provide harmony. Thanks, Radio. I appreciate it, bud. Oh my God, listen to this. Fascism is basically just applying Marxian class theory to the German idealist mythology of the conception of the nation. Like, those are, like, you're just taking a bunch of words and putting them together. Like, that's just a word salad, dude. That's not actually a thought. Like, it's like some horseshoe theory shit. Communism and fascism are actually just the same thing. People who are trying to resolve homelessness are the same as people who are trying to kill all the Jews. Those are the same. Yeah. Tons of layoffs coming. Yep, pay sages, absolutely. But don't worry, not those executives. They'll still get their super bonuses. Dude, if anything, the bonuses will increase. Right? The bonuses will increase. Dog, dude, stop. Please stop. Just, like, please stop, dude. Like, honestly. Like, it is embarrassing. Like, mass murderers are also liars. Like seriously. Like, I don't understand why that's a difficult concept to understand. People who are mass murderers also lie. Right? Like, when Adolf Hitler takes over the... socialism is in the name. That's what the S is in Nazi. Socialism. Like, they're also liars. Like, I don't know what, like, a guy that's willing to round up huge sections of the populace, literally put them in trains and then put them in gas ovens, is also capable of telling lies. Like, and now I've got to deal with a bunch of people being like, well, the early Nazis and the early fascists, yeah, so that they could, like, early... Okay, bud. You talk about whatever flat earth thing you need to talk about. Like... Marxism is fascism because a bunch of fascists said Marxism. Marxism is fascism because a bunch of fascists said Marxism. Like... Oh, what's that, my little guy? You hear it? You hear it? Fascism is inspired by Marxism. Bye-bye. You're scaring everybody, dude. You're scaring everybody. Congratulations, dog. You have now said the most stupid thing that's ever been said on the channel. Like, the stupidest thing that had been ever said on the channel was that the Nazis lost the Soviets because of the cold. That it was cold weather that defeated the Nazis, not the Soviet military or the economy or any of that kind of stuff. And saying fascism is inspired by Marxism is now officially the stupidest thing that's ever been said on the channel. Like, just stupid. Like, we don't need to continue with you. That's a very, very, very dumb thing to say. Like, if you know nothing about Marxism, if you know absolutely nothing about the subject, then Sure, I guess. Just like if you don't know anything about the Earth being round, you can believe that it's flat. Right? I just have no patience for flat Earth shit in here. Like if you're like, it's time to just start listening. It's just time to start listening. That's all. Stop participating in the conversation. Maybe actually read something. Right? Maybe actually go read the Communist Manifesto. Maybe read the works of Marx. Like maybe actually read something about the history of Germany. Right? Buddy. Yeah, what was the point of that conversation? I think I wanted to let it go for a little while, right? Because I think... okay, no more. You're a good boy. I'm doing a show. I know you're playful. You're feeling playful. I know. Okay, buddy, you're good. No more. Hey, what did I just say? No more, okay? Chew your bone. Stop it. Sometimes it's nice to just let these guys hang themselves, right? Like, it's as simple as that. Like, the dog didn't exactly make the best first impression coming in here, but I wanted to let him speak for a little while just to see how he'll just hang himself. And, congratulations. Like, you said the dumbest thing that I think's been said on the channel ever. So, yeah, when you almost reach the point, but it goes over your head, yeah. Like, but and I don't even know how you get there. Like, how do you get there to this idea that the opposite, like literally the fascists went after communists. The first concentration camp was a communist concentration camp, where they took communists and put them into the same, like, all of the Holocaust shit you've ever seen, right? Well, that was done to the communists first. Like, the idea that the fascism is actually Marxism, like, it's brain dead. Like, brain dead. You can literally just stop listening. And you should. You straight up should. Like, there's no... you can't convince a flat earther that the world is round. Like, you just can't. Right? So, stop letting them take all the oxygen up. Because that's all that is. Right? That's all that is. It's just taking all the oxygen up in the room. Can you imagine if we tried to engage? That's all we'd do tonight. That's what we would be doing tonight. Is just dealing with this one person who's a flat earther, trying to convince us that the earth is actually flat, saying the dumbest stuff you've ever heard, right? And pretending as though it's not dumb because he knows some buzzwords. Like, it's pretty, like, it's pretty. I'm glad that I've reached this conclusion, like the flat Earth stuff, because, like, you see it everywhere, man. Like, you see it everywhere. Like, if somebody thinks that 1 + 1 = potato, and you're like, no, potato's not even a number. It's not even part of the conversation, right? And then it's 1 + 1 = 2. That just doesn't matter. They're just going to be like 1 + 1 = potato, and they'll just argue with you until the end of time about it. So there's just no point. Serious question? A serious question, Compton? You? A serious question? Dude, I'm really looking forward to this question. If communists are just attracted to power, then why not just curry favor from the existing system? Yeah, it's easier to be a cop right now. Yeah, that's a Michael Parenti question right there. If communists are just attracted to power, then why are they always currying favor from the powerless? Why is it that they always try to work with people who have no power? If it's just that they're attracted to power, right? Anemone. What I don't get is we have 24/7 live streams from the ISS. You can see the curvature of the Earth in real time. Like the moon, Saturn, Mars, all around. Yeah, this is exactly what I'm talking about, Anemone. Like, if there are people who believe the Earth is flat, then you just got to start seeing it faster in these conversations. Like, not everyone needs to be engaged with. Some people really are just like, the Earth is flat, and that's it. It's conversation over. And fascism is inspired by Marxism is just like, that's new. That's a next level. Like, that's next level dumb. Like, you gotta really, 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 really be illiterate to say something as dumb as that. Serge, I don't know if I mentioned this. My mom used to work at U of T, and the government cut funding to biomedical research. Yeah, in reference to the previous live stream. I don't remember what you're referring, but like, that's the kind of shit that we do, right? Like, we're not interested in improving the quality of life for the citizenry. We're not interested in improving the situation for anybody. We're interested in raising corporate profits. That's all we're doing, right? And if we literally have to burn down the very infrastructure of our society in order to do it, we will. Like, the most boneheaded thing any society has ever done in perhaps the history of humanity is to deindustrialize, is to take its industrial base and ship it to another nation. Like, can you imagine a stupider thing to do? Literally take your capacity to produce things, your ability to make stuff, and send it somewhere else. Send it somewhere else, so that those people can benefit take the benefits of industrialization, right? Because in the mind of the neoliberal capitalist and the fascist, the only benefit that exists is getting paper money for themselves, is profits, right? And so, but they're more than willing to sacrifice the success of their own nation, the success of their own cities, the success of their own people, the material, actual success of their communities and culture, if it means they get more numbers on a screen. We've seen them do it over and over and over again, and they're not going to stop, right? They're not just going to suddenly decide, like, whoa, well, that didn't work. Oh, oopsie-doo. Yeah, deindustrializing was a complete and total disaster. We should probably not do that again. They're just going to keep doing that, because the only thing they care about are the numbers on the screen. That's all they care about. And they are trickling the wealth down into secret pedophile islands, right? Like, that's who these people are, and they just seem to not be able to stop themselves, or are even interested in stopping themselves. Yep. Garv, good to see you, bud. Generation, good to see you too, bud. Similarly ridiculous argument I keep hearing is Nazis were National Socialists, so there, yeah, only proves how little people understand history. Yeah, again, like, it's like, yeah, oh, you mean somebody who is like a psychopathic mass murderer can also be a liar? Like, I said it before, these arguments are so childish, because, like, yeah, people who are like overt, crazed, psychopathic murderers writing about how they want to commit a genocide against the Jews and then doing it are also very capable of just telling big, egregious lies. Like, and it's obviously in the interest of these people to take their antagonist, which is communism and socialism, and attempt to besmirch them. Like, this feels extremely obvious to me. Like, I don't even know why this is something that needs to be explained. Like, that's how apparent it is. That, like, oh yeah, people who are psychopathic murderers will also lie about things. Like, Generation says, who wants a working class that makes things? It's better for the working class to work in call centers and process sales in stores. Yeah, until you can't sell anything. Until there's nothing to sell. And there's no one calling the call centers because there's nobody that has the money anymore. Yeah, sell more cars! Exactly. Tinker, good to see you, bud. Reported by Toronto Star, Trudeau calls Ford's for-profit healthcare plan innovation. Yeah. I had that article yesterday. I don't know if I actually reported on it, but that's definitely happening. Like, here in the province of Ontario, Doug Ford is working to privatize the healthcare system, and our Prime Minister, the great and powerful Justin Trudeau, is calling it innovation. Here's your capitalist innovation, guys. Here it is. When capitalists talk about innovation, what they mean is we want you to pay for things that are already free. We want to make systems less efficient. We want to ensure that systems are privately held by private ownership so that we can force you to pay for them when you're at your lowest and most desperate. Like, this is the capitalist innovation that they're talking about. They're not talking about, like, better technology or new stuff or any of that kind of stuff. They're literally talking about methods to exploit your desperation. That's what's considered innovation. And the prime minister of our country is outright explicitly saying it to your face now. Like literally. Yeah, our goal is to make sure that you live in poverty and desperation. And that's innovative. Trudeau and liberals have taken me from being a social democrat to a real socialist communist, nationalized the means of production. There is no other long-term solution. Yeah. We are getting to the point now where it's just embarrassing. Like, it really is just, like, embarrassing to take any other position at this point. Like, they're not going to have a come-to-Jesus moment. These guys are not going to be like, maybe we should reform the system for the benefit of the working class. They're just not going to do that, right? And until we start threatening them with a genuine overthrow of the systems that they benefit from, nothing's going to change. And they're definitely not going to let you do it electorally. Generation says, my professor is getting a surgery in Toronto and it's happening in a private hospital. The Ontario government has to rent that space because she's not using private healthcare. Like, it's so fucking stupid. Yeah, it's so innovative to spend money on just a space, right? So, wow, the innovation. Here's a room that would be here no matter what. Got to pay someone for it. Like, whoa, the innovation. Like, they're just finding new ways to innovate slavery. That's what they're doing. Like, that's all they're doing. It's just slavery with extra steps. And they don't give a shit if you die. They don't give a shit if you're in suffering or in pain. They don't give a shit about any of that. They care about dollars on a screen. That's what they care about, right? And the crazy thing about all that, right? I've got articles here. Brazil and Argentina preparing new Latin American currency to reduce reliance on US dollar. So not only do we have the renminbi, which is between Russia and China, not only do we have other countries like Saudi Arabia buying the yuan, not only do we have BRICS, a secondary international organization that's coming up, we also now have Brazil and Argentina trying to create a federated currency for Latin America. Like, the American dollar is going to plummet. It's going to plummet. Because at the end of the day, the American dollar is going to be tied to nothing that has any value whatsoever. We don't make anything. We don't produce anything. We don't do anything. All we export is war at this stage in the game. And the rest of the world is going to look at it and be like, well, we don't want war, so no thank you. Garv says, another reason Nazis chose to call themselves socialists is because socialism was just more popular among people. Yeah, now fascists will co-opt eco-socialism. Yeah, I love it. These guys that say things like, well, Nazis are like, not only do they just disbelieve that people will lie, right? But also, like, fascists and capitalists have a long history of co-opting things. Right? Like, you take the green movement is exactly a case in point. Like, they will just co-opt it and be like, yeah, we'll put green on it, eco-friendly. Just, like, slap it on everything. It doesn't matter if it's true. Just say that it is. Right? So using the logic of these guys, you'd have to say that eco-socialism, environmentalism doesn't work. Because, take a look, capitalists use it. Like, it's just thick. It's just fucking thick. Anemone. And when we have no money left, they'll buy up the real estate and tie our housing to employment. So we'll be even more desperate. Yeah, the model is the coal mines of Virginia. right? Like during the gold rush era, right, during the colonial period, the model is to have workers who are in houses that you own working at something that you own, an enterprise that you also own, and are forced to buy goods that you also own, right, from the company store. And you get to set the price and the wage, right? And you ensure that the wage you pay will never meet the bills that are due. And so that they're constantly in this perpetual hamster wheel of needing to go to work. That's the model that they're obviously moving us towards, right? They're obviously moving us that way. Like to think that they're doing anything else at this point is just like yeah, it's just flat earther shit. Like it's clearly what they want, and it seems like we're just letting them do it. Seems like that we're just like, yeah, okay, that's fine. I'm gonna work my entire life away to not even be able to pay for an apartment. Normal society. We're a normal people doing a lot. We're real normal doing normal things. Serge says it's sort left on the people to be innovative and environmental friendly. It is on the people, yeah. So many corporations expect the consumer to be focused on environment. If people didn't get treated so shitty by bosses, you're basically just a product. In this corporate office, the toxic culture and censorship with boss sucking, yeah. Absolutely. Good to see you grinning. Urban Chaos Girl UCG. I love the name. It's what a fun name that is. I hope you're here to be beautiful. Let's see. Here's the first comment from Urban Chaos Girl. Unless you were here earlier and I forgot. But our leftist friends here in Georgia, Atlanta area are smashing ATMs at the bank that are funding the police. Yeah, unfortunately they've been charged with domestic terrorism. Yeah, absolutely. Now, of course they'll be charged with that, right? Like those sorts of actions will always be met with huge aggression by the state. And I mean, I've got privatized prisons lead to more inmates, longer sentences, study fines, right? Gotta fuel the prison system, gotta fuel the slave system. And you definitely can't go after the banks. That's an old story, dude. You can't go after the merchants. No. But the thing that got Jesus Christ crucified was going after the merchants. That he walked into a temple and saw some merchants set up shop in a sacred space that they weren't allowed to be in and doing the practice that they were doing in. And so Christ picked up a whip and drove them out of the temple that they were breaking the law in. Right? And what happened to him? He got crucified. Like, so nothing's changed. Rules are still in place. We're just not publicly nailing people to poles anymore. That's the social advancement that's occurred over 2,000 years. Right? That the basic idea is still in place. That there are rich people and thugs who defend those rich people called cops. And if you do something to fight back against the power structure, well, then you'll be crucified. But in this case, it means that now they've found a way to monetize the crucifixion, right? So instead of just nailing you to a post and saying to everybody, hey, look, this is what happens to guys that do this, now they take you and put you in a cell and put you to work, right, as a prisoner of the state. That's the solution. That you become like a prison slave, essentially. Corporations don't want the West to produce anything. Yeah. Can I say that Ben Norton is like the cutest? You know what? You can. I actually completely agree with you. I have to say, like what a little button. What a cute little button this guy is. Right? Especially now he's got like a nice little beard going on, right? It's not as majestic as mine. It's not as majestic as mine. He keeps his hair nice and like cropped and also, but it's his beautiful blue eyes. Don't you think? Ben Norton with his beautiful, beautiful blue eyes. I find myself just swimming in those eyes anytime he talks to me. It's absolutely beautiful. Yeah, Ben is a good voice too. That's the thing. Right? So much love for Ben Norton in the chat right now. I got to tell you, I love Ben Norton. He's a comrade. I love his videos. Ben is a good voice. Yeah. Yeah, I suspect the United States would risk a nuclear exchange to maintain its domination of the world. Well, on that point, I actually have a touch of good news. Just a touch, just a smidge, something that puts a little crack in the idea that the U.S. and China are on this path for war, right? There's this idea that, and certainly an idea that exists within the military-industrial complex, that the United States and China are on a collision course for war. And there have been lots of signs to this regard. Joe Biden has been telling Americans, you better come home or stay there, right? That no more of this, like you're not going to keep your American citizenship. And lots of Americans have been leaving. There's been like a decorporatization effect that's been going on in China. But at the same time, why U.S.-China trade is on track to break records despite all politics. So despite all of the struggles surrounding Taiwan, despite all of the difficulty going on there, despite all of the tensions, despite Pelosi's visit to Taiwan, despite all of this, well, the United States and China are trading more than ever. They're trading more than ever. And this is one of those things that I've always sort of found myself thinking about, the idea that America is going to go to war with China. That I keep thinking to myself, like, how insane are the Americans actually? How insane are the Americans actually to actually think to themselves, yeah, we're going to go to war with China while we're relying on their trade? Like, where are Americans going to get their shit from? Where are Americans going to actually get their shit from? Like, America doesn't make anything. It imports everything. And who's its primary importer? Like, one of its major partners? China. So this idea that the United States is going to start a war with China, like, I think that you'd be looking at an internal revolution inside of America almost instantaneously, because everything, like, the flow of trade would stop. I think it'd be a huge blunder for America to do. Which is why I think antagonizing China the way it does is such a huge mistake. But we've seen it time and time again with America. They're very dumb. Like, they're not an intelligent people. They're really coming into the conversation, and they make all kinds of decisions that are against their own interests. That destroy relationships and cause lots of problems, because Americans really don't have much by way of, they're very ideological, especially these days, right? Like, you'll notice one of the things that I continuously have noticed about modern capitalism, right? Modern capitalism, all of these capitalists have suddenly become moralists. Right? That they know they can no longer win the argument based on reality. They can no longer win the material argument. They can no longer stand up and say that, well, capitalism is lifting people out of poverty and doing this. Like, all of that is bullshit, and they know it. And so every capitalist needs to become a moralist and have a moral perspective about why capitalism is morally correct, right? Or come up with stupid arguments like it's just natural, right? They can't actually win the argument of, okay, is this working? They can't have an economic conversation because they know that it's failed, and they know it's going to continue failing. And that's why I think America is acting so stupidly on the world stage, because they're acting like moralists when they don't have any position to be moral from. They're like it's like an amoral psychopath trying to teach you about what's good in the world. Like, it's not going to work, right? And literally their entire ideology comes down to, we're the best because we say so, and this is ours because we want it. And, like, you can't reason with that. And if that's your whole ethos, then you're going to do dumb shit all the time. And America does, constantly. And all of the stupidity and all the ridiculousness, it's going to cost millions of people's lives, and destroyed entire economies. And it's all going to come home. It's all going to come back home. Ben Norton's tweet about how the U.S. flag is viewed the same way as the Nazi swastika in the global South is very important. More people need to speak like this. Yeah. And I don't know what it's going to take for Americans to really put that together. Right? Like, Americans seem to think that the flag represents the symbol of freedom and liberty and truth and justice and a better life and opportunity. It's like the vast majority of the rest of the world takes a look at the American flag and is like, yeah, it's the Nazi flag. These are the same picture, right? Like, it's incredible. Like, it's incredible to think that, yeah, we can go all across Africa, South America, Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe, and just annihilate and destroy everyone we want to constantly 100% of the time, but we're the good guys. Like, that. This is actually what the Americans genuinely believe, and it's astounding. It's astounding. Like, Libya alone, the Vietnam War alone, like, should tell you pretty explicitly that America is a Nazi state. And it's certainly how their victims perceive them. And to believe anything else is just to wallow in, like, this flat earther delusion shit. Like, you're not the good guys. Not even remotely close. And what's terrifying is that, like, imagine if someone like Hannibal Lecter was actually attempting to convince people that he was the good guy, that he was doing the right thing. Like, that's where we're at with these guys. Like, it's crazy. It's crazed. It's lunatic. It's lunacy. Danerka says, I support everything our comrades are doing in Atlanta, Georgia to stop Cop City. Yeah, they didn't do anything violent. It's not fair. Yeah, no, cops can kill people, but if you break stuff, that's the problem, right? Capitalists are allowed to impoverish people, render them homeless, create entire homeless encampments, flood the homeless encampments with drugs like they do, right? Increase poverty, increase desperation, destroy entire communities in order to increase their profit motive. But if you go and break an ATM, you go to jail. America, America. Anemone, Foucault discipline and Punish talks about how nothing has changed about punishment, just the method. Danerka says, we're just putting POC and indigenous people in overcrowded jails as well as privately funded prisons. Yeah, absolutely. John sounded PR? What? What? What are you saying, Cotton? What are you saying? Radio Halifax says Ben's got an Alensky look going on. Oh, wow. What a deep insult. How dare you insult Ben Norton so? Cyrus Jansen has been talking about this. Has been talking about what? I don't understand the comment. That's fine. Santora E Britannica, good to see you, bud. Or Britannia, rather. Should say it right. The United States relies on China for trade, but America knows its only way to keep trade is by going to war with China. China is able to support America and work against it at the same time. Yeah, I mean, and never ever forget how absolutely deranged Americans are. Like they will just blow themselves up. Like they're gonna go into a war with China, thinking like it's gonna be a war with it's gonna be a war with Libya or something, and they're just gonna get blown out of the water. Adam McPherson says, I like Ben Norton, but his 9/11 was a blowback, not an inside job. Peace was really bad. Went from being someone who didn't speak truth to power to disinformation agent. Gen Z, I don't know who GZ is, but Max were vicious to 9/11 truth. Yeah. The anarchist says, China and U.S. are what Mark Blythes refers to as a death embrace. China funds the middle-class workers in the United States. in turn, China gets all its surpluses from the United States. Yeah, and I think the big difference, anarchist, is that China is setting itself up for some kind of inevitable collision, right? That China is not sitting here being like, this is going to continue forever. I think because China plans and China comes up with ideas and thoughts and I think when the collision happens, because it's almost inevitable, like the United States is too dumb they'll blunder into it if anything. China will go, okay, this is a serious situation. We need to reform into a war economy, or like reform our economy, restructure our economy in a big serious way. They'll have like an emergency meeting and they'll actually structure it so that, okay, we're taking care of the people in a serious way, restructuring and moving our economy towards where we need to move it towards to deal with the crises that are unfolding in front of us. Whereas the Americans will be like, free market will do it. Sure, we got 100 million homeless people, but, you know, free market will work it out. Yeah, that's what'll happen. And that's the difference, right? It's not to say that China won't experience hardship. It's not to say that China will be like, haha, got you, right? But just they have systems to deal with it, and we don't. Like, our instinct during periods of crisis is to do vulture capitalism. That's what we do, right? Like the shock doctrine, Nia McClain's shock doctrine. She talks all about this. And if there was this huge shock that hit the American system, such as the loss of trade from China due to war, how do we think the American system is going to act? How do we think the empire is going to act? Do we think the empire is going to go, oh shit, we got to take care of the citizens and make sure everybody's secured and all that? Or do we literally think it's like, yeah, fuck you. Work harder. Get a better job. Which one of those two do we think is more real? Kukik, first comment I've ever seen you here. I hope it's a beautiful one. The TikTok live stream is going crazy. Great. Let the TikTok live stream go crazy, dude. The reason why I don't talk directly to the TikTok live stream is because it's insane. I can't keep up with it. It's difficult. He's scared. See, exactly. He's scared to debate. Dude, come over to YouTube. Come over to YouTube. It's easy. Come over to YouTube. I almost guarantee that you don't know what you're talking about. The reason why I don't debate people is because most people are illiterate. And that's not just me saying it. That's literally the Barbara Bush Foundation for Literacy. Most Americans are functionally illiterate. And the reason why I don't debate people is because in the first 2 comments, I find out that they're illiterate. And so there's no debate to be had. Like, there's no debate to be had. You're not capable of debating somebody if you don't know anything about the subject. And if you show you don't know anything about the subject right away, then the debate's over. And there's no debate to be had. Right? I'm busy working and loving capitalism. Yep, licking boots. Licking boots. Yeah, U.S. citizens won't protest a nuclear war. We're way too complacent. Mesmerized by capitalism. Yeah, dude. I think the only conspiracy theory that I actually 100% believe in right now is one that I myself am generating, which is that I actually do think the CIA is hypnotizing people. I think that these apps and all of this stuff that's come into the society so quickly, and the smartphones and all of this, the CIA is using all of this stuff as a way to hypnotize the populace. And put them into a state of complacency to make them even duller than they already were. And also to set trigger words. So if people hear like communism, if they hear socialism, if they hear these things, that they'll get triggered emotionally and be incapable of actually having a rational discussion about it. I've seen enough. It's actually amazing to see how unwilling most people are to have even the most rudimentary conversation about the subject of communism. And like, it's literally like it's become rote. Like, I've had the conversation so many times that I can see that there's a script going on where, like, I say, okay, this is what I think about communism, or they start to get the glimmering of communism. Or that, well, this sounds like communism. And then you're like, oh, well, you know, there's interesting ideas there. And then immediately it's just, I'm 100 million dead Vuva iPhone. Like, it's literally like that. It's just immediate. And I really am starting to get to the point where I'm like, is there like a trigger worded like script built in somehow so that most Americans, when they hear the word communism, it just brain shuts off, their gut takes over, or whatever it is, and they just start spewing words, and they just become irrational, incapable of absorbing information, and it just seems like that's what happens. And I'm not saying that what is happening is that the CIA is hypnotizing people, but I am saying that if we did a church commission and it came out that the CIA was putting hypnosis into phones and apps and things like this, I'd be like, yep, called it. That's more or less my position. I'm just like, yeah, of course. Like, that. You take a look at MK Ultra, you take a look at what the CIA's already admitted to, you take a look at them actually, what they've actually already copped to. Like, their psychedelics research, their research on consciousness, MK Ultra, it's all about mind control, right? And you're telling me that the CIA wouldn't use cell phone technology and screen technology to try to literally hypnotize people? I think they absolutely will do this, like, if they're not already doing it. And I think we're seeing it in front of us. Do I have the smoking gun that shows you that that's the case? No, because we haven't had a church commission in 50 years. But if we do have a church commission, I bet it'll come out. Mark my words. Mark my words. China is working on, this is from Centaura, China is working on cutting America off the global stage with its Belt and Road project. Exactly. America cannot allow this and does not know any way to deal with such a threat without war. Yep, I think that's absolutely true. I think that America is looking at the Belt and Road Initiative as well as BRICS, right? BRICS is a big, big threat. Like the de-dollarification, right? The de-dollarification of the world is a huge threat to American hegemony. Like, I think that the Americans just don't know what to do anymore. I think that they've painted themselves into a corner. I think they're too stupid to realize that what they've done is painted themselves into a corner. I really think that the ruling class of America is literally just like, we got all the money and can go have sex with children on Jeffrey Epstein's island. And that's literally as far as they've gotten. Meanwhile, there are other countries that are like, oh, if we do this for the next 5 years and that'll get us here, and then maybe we can move forward there and actually think about our people for what the society is going to look like in 5 years, right? Capitalists don't have that. They literally don't have that. It's not part of their ethos. It's not part of the culture. It's not built into their thinking. They literally think in quarters. Line go up. Line go up. That's it. As long as line go up, they don't care. Like, they don't care if they're poisoning the water or destroying, and like, it doesn't matter if it's all careening towards a brick wall, right? As long as line go up for the next 4 months. And so they're gonna get outplayed. It's not, I shouldn't say gonna get outplayed. They've been outplayed. Like, the Americans literally deindustrialized. Like, they've been outplayed significantly. Like, if this is a chess game, the Americans have checker pieces. Like, that's where they are. And I think they're just beginning to realize, like, oh, we are fucked. We're fucked up. And so they're doing more and more desperate things. And the desperation is going to force them to use the only tool they know how to use, which is war, to try to resolve problems or assert themselves, and it's going to fail, right? Because you can't actually build a civilization or an empire on this. You can't actually sustain a society on the idea of, we'll just exploit people forever. We'll just take war and do war and blow everybody up forever. It's just not going to work. It's just, and you wouldn't want to live in the society that it produced if it did. Yeah, it won't happen anytime soon. My guess would be the end of this century, going into the 22nd century. Yeah, we'll see. Oddity, thank you. I can always rely on you, bud. I always rely on you. America wants Cuba and Venezuela, Nicaragua to give up their old Soviet arms for Ukraine, and the USA, will replace it with their gear. Yeah, right. We'll see. We keep calling the U.S. the greatest army in the world, but it will be helpful to know that they can only pick fight with the smallest armies and don't even win those fights. Yeah, it's true, Garv. Like, it is true. Like, the American military, it is the most threatening because it's the most well-funded. And in terms of technology, they're definitely ahead of everybody else. Like, that's definitely the truth. But they're not very intelligent. Like, they're not very smart with their military, frankly. Like, the whole idea of the Vietnam War was to, quote-unquote, staunch the flow of communism. And all they really managed to do is just blow the place up, murder a bunch of people, and communism is going strong in Vietnam. Like, it's just, they just, took it out of the conversation for 50 years, right? That Vietnam didn't have any buildings left, It's just like, but this is how capitalism has to assert itself. It can't assert itself any other way. That should another economic system arise that is a threat, it'll just try to go in and blow it up. And I actually think it'll be really heartbreaking to see if like it was really tough going through the destruction of Libya. Like when Libya was destroyed, I wasn't doing this, right? It was just like me living my life, hearing about Libya and the destruction of Libya, and then researching Libya, finding out about it. It's literally like a country that decided, hey, we want to build a society on egalitarian principles and make sure everybody's taken care of, and have a strong economy and have a strong people, and America just straight up going in and blowing it up. Like, that's what happened. It was like another Vietnam, but faster. Like, not so entrenched. And the Americans are just going to keep doing this. They're just going to keep doing this. There's no sign that they're going to stop doing it. And this and it's going to get more desperate, because eventually the rest of the world is going to rebuild itself and like India is still recovering from British imperialism. It's still recovering from the British capitalist period, right? Like, before the capitalists showed up in India, before the British imperialists showed up in India, India had a very robust industry. It was one of the largest textile manufacturers in the world. And the British went in there and destroyed literally destroyed the looms, cut the thumbs off of textile workers, like literally destroyed the industry, burnt it to the ground. The British the Indians are still recovering from that, right? So, but they're going to recover, right? And they've got 1.4 billion people. China's got 1.4 billion people. We got 300 million? Like, get completely fucked in this conversation. Santora says, COVID made us slam face first into the ground and set us back over a decade of progress economically alongside Trump's policies and Biden's now. We would fail if China pulled out its cheap goods, as the United States cannot even afford to support its citizens off cheap goods due to them not paying full labor cost. Yeah, I mean, so America's not going to accept this relationship, right? Because when we deindustrialized and sent our manufacturing over to China, we had this kind of idea of like, haha, we'll make those slaves work for us. But that dynamic is going to flip. That China's the one that's producing. It's the one that's actually making the stuff. And it's not that China's going to work for us, it's that, or that China's going to rely on us, it's that we're going to rely on China. And that's the dynamic that's happening now. So who's the actual vassal state? Right? Doesn't look like it's China. It's a black mirror, if you will, John. Thanks, Danarchist. Kuklak, Yugoslavia is the most successful communist country, in my opinion. I have to admit, straight up, I don't know enough about Yugoslavia. It's a little kind of hole in my knowledge base that I got to shore up a little bit better. I think because Kosovo and Yugoslavia, that whole situation, that happened I was too young. I didn't really understand what was happening when it was happening. And I've never really gone back and studied it anymore. Whereas something like Libya happened when I was pretty conscious and more aware of what was going on in the world. And so I experienced that a little more in real time. But I definitely need to do more research on Yugoslavia because it's for sure a gap in my knowledge that I can plug up. Command Genius, good to see you, bud. Fun fact, the VOC's building in Washington, D.C. has actual Nazi soldiers on their wall of victims thing. Yeah. Victims of communism stuff, right? Like, you open up, like, the Black Book of Communism. Open it up. It's all fucking Nazis. It's like, oh, these are the people we're concerned about. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, and there's a video showing literal homeless tents across the street from them. Yeah. Isaac, good to see you, bud. President Obrador of Mexico has called the U.S. to join the world, or they are going to be left behind, and that is not good for both of them because Mexico relies on the U.S. Yeah, it's somewhat heartbreaking watching Mexico right now, right? Because Mexico, I feel like Mexico is like the friend of America, just holding their hands to their heads, just being like, please stop being such a fucking psycho. Just stop being such a huge, massive psycho. Like, we could just live in the world and everything could be fine. We could produce the goods that need to be produced. We could reindustrialize. We could build a productive capacity together. We could just stabilize everything, ensure that everybody has food and shelter and live in the world. And it's just this idea of, like, money needs to go. I need all the money. I need money. Oh my. Like, I was just thinking about this just today. That the thing that has really caused a problem for us as a people is the trifecta, right? There's a trifecta going on of there's a trifecta of worship that Americans have fallen for. And it's really, really devastating. That the trifecta is the worship of money, I think is at the top, right? So you got a triangle. And money is definitely at the top, where we worship money. And money is God, right? Money is God. And just for you, Adam. Money is God, right? And everything needs to be sacrificed at the altar of money, which is just this absolute absurdism because money isn't real. You can't replace a river with money. You can't replace food with money, right? And so there's this overwhelming worship of money at the sake of all other things. The other corner of the trifecta is the worship of the individual. That there is no collective, like Thatcher literally saying things like there's no society, right? There's no such thing as culture or any of this, even though it's obviously false. There are massive institutions and there are massive structures that exist that obviously are a society. But worshippers don't care about reality or facts, right? Worshippers care about their dumb little ideology. And they genuinely believe that me as an individual is more powerful than the entire culture and everyone who's ever lived, including all institutions and then all the forces of the universe as well, right? So there's this just absolute brain dead, just manic drive towards the worship of the individual, which you can see manifested in the society under the freedom crowd, right? Freedom! My freedom matters more than the survival of the entire species. Like that kind of thinking, right? And then to link the triangle together in a perfect, like absolutely perfect, just is the worship of ignorance, which is on the other corner, right? So you've got the worship of money, the worship of the individual, and the worship of ignorance, which is not only just being proud of being dumb and illiterate, which are basically, you can see this in the debate bros, right? Debate bros are so proud that they're stupid. They're so proud of how dumb they are. Like, I don't know anything, I'm completely illiterate, and I'm going to debate this guy. Like, that is who they are. And it's not only a pride in how illiterate they are, it's also a hatred of knowledge. That if you know something, and you can see this in the anti-vax crowd, you can see this all over the place, right? It's this absolute hatred of people who know what they're talking about, and people who have done studies and have expertise. And so you have this absolutely horrific combination of the worship of a god that doesn't exist, the worship of the self over a culture, a community, and then it's all linked together by just being proud of how dumb you are. And this is the reason why America is collapsing. This is the reason why capitalism is failing above all else, if you ask me. The cosmonaut, like, what you're saying is, like, verifiably false. They've opened up the Soviet archives, and literally capitalists have gone in, like, academics have gone into the Soviet archives, and they've come out being like, yeah, the Soviets didn't intend for that famine to happen. Famines happen, bud. And the communists have learned from them, and what the lessons that they learned, like the region that famine happens in was a region that is commonly struck by famine. That region gets hit by famine fairly commonly before what's called the Holodomor occurred. The Holodomor was the last one because the communists figured it out, put it all together, and then prevented the famines from occurring again. Right? What you are espousing is Nazi propaganda. It's not even CIA propaganda. It's actually Nazi propaganda. And how do we know? Because we've gone into the Soviet archives. We've taken a look at the way the Soviets were talking about that event as it was happening. And the way the Soviets were talking about it was, oh my God, this is a crisis. We have to deal with it. It wasn't, we're going to get these Ukrainians. Right? Which, once again, just absolutely destroys all of the accusations that come out of the West in regards to other countries and their genocides and all this kind of stuff. There's just no such thing as a secret genocide. There's just no such thing as like a secret underground Illuminati genocide. When countries and cultures commit to doing a genocide, they do so extremely openly. They make speeches about it. They organize it. They vote on it in Parliament. Like, when here in Canada, when we did the residential school system, we voted on it in Parliament. It's on the public record. You can go see it. When the system of slavery was enacted throughout Britain and America, it was openly talked about in the halls of power. Right? They voted on it. They made decisions. They organized troops. It's all out in the open. Right? The eradication of the First Nations people. All very wide in the public, open. Anyone can see the documents, right? When Hitler does the Holocaust, right? He literally writes a book called Mein Kampf where he says, I want to kill the Jews, and then gets into power and then proceeds to do it. And it's all in the open. They voted on it. They talked about it. Anyone can see them do it, right? There's literally no such thing as a secret genocide. And the more you actually think about it, the more you realize that it's impossible for there to be a secret genocide. The scale and the amount of preparation and organization that would be required to commit a genocide of this scale intentionally demands organization in a huge centralized way. You have to talk about it. You have to. You can't just like psychically look at one another and just be like, yeah, we'll get the Ukrainians. Yeah. You got to talk about it. And so what Putin opened the Soviet archives. Capitalist academics, people who are anti-communist, have gone into the Soviet archives. They've taken a look at what the Soviets all had to say, and every single one of them, because they want to maintain their academic credibility. Right? They're part of institutions like Harvard and Oxford, right? These are credible academics who want to be considered credible. are coming out of the Soviet archives saying, yeah, it was a famine, it was a disaster. We can maybe blame incompetence. Like, we can maybe point at some things and be like, yeah, you stupid you did this. But even the communists themselves were like, okay, what were the mistakes that we made? How did we cause this problem? Right? This is the other side that the capitalists never want to admit. That the communists themselves were like, okay, this was a disaster. How did we contribute to the disaster? Not in order to assign blame, but to solve the problem. And to say, okay, well, there is this, and there is this, and we could have done this better. We also have to admit, like, there are natural factors in all of this, but this is something that we can work on. Do you ever see capitalists talk about that? No, ever, right? Like, so communists say, oh, what could we improve? And they attempted to. And then, but at no point did even a single one of these communists say, we should starve the Ukrainians. Just doesn't exist. It's not real. It's another one of these flat earther things that's just infected the discourse that comes out of literally the Nazis. It's Nazi propaganda that was spread around during World War II. And here we are just talking about it, even though, like, there's literally no credible, there's no one credible who actually says this. Oh, the cosmonauts doubling down. Didn't build a wall to keep them in? I don't know what you're talking about even, dude. And the only people who think communism is good are people who haven't lived in them and have lived in capitalism. I mean, the Chinese certainly think that their system is good. Harvard did a big study on the opinion of the Chinese people, and they're more or less happy with the communists, right? They're more or less happy with the communists. And the 17 years that they were polling the Chinese people, the opinion of the Communist Party actually improved over time. So the Chinese seem perfectly happy with their communist leaders. The Vietnamese seem perfectly happy. When you poll the Russians, you got majorities saying we want to go back to communism. So I just don't think you know what you're talking about, dude. Like, straight up. Like, this is why I don't do the debate bro stuff. Because straight up, like, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, you could do like a 30-second Google search on this stuff, right? You could literally just be like, what is the opinion of the Chinese people of their own government? What is the opinion of the Russian people of communism? What's the opinion of the Hungarian people of communism? What's the opinion of Eastern European people in regards to communism, right? You could do it. You're just not going to, right? Because it just interferes with your flat earth perspective. Grinning says, if you hate communism, you want sociopathic capitalists to run your life. You actually think that Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos can run your life better than you can. Command Genius says, look at how popular the Russian Communist Party is. Yeah, it'll be really, really interesting. It'll be really, really interesting to see what happens post-Putin. But Putin has been a very interesting figure. His reign over Russia has been very interesting. What a tumultuous period of time for any ruler, especially one like Putin, who I think was kind of hoping to just sort of ride Russia into unifying with Europe. I think that was sort of his hope. That he just wanted to grab the wheel and then just unify with Europe, join NATO, and see Russia like through that gate. That his predecessors had sort of set it up for that and had worked towards that. And I think he was just sort of hoping, okay, and I'm the one that's going to stick the landing, right? Not in the cards. So he was forced to make some real pivots and forced to make some real serious decisions. Serious decisions as a leader. And only time will tell if those decisions are panning out or have panned out. But a pivot back towards China and into BRICS, which, incidentally, I definitely ignored someone's comment here. I didn't mean to. Oh, we're talking Animal Farm. Oh, yeah. Oh yeah, that was this. That was this. You mentioned BRICS, but did you pick up Lula's call for South American currency, showing he's not afraid of being targeted by the CIA, aka Wall Street? Yeah, absolutely. Like, there are many threats coming for the empire right now. And Kukek, pretty sure every ideology has its ups and downs. Every ideology has its goal. Yeah, like the goal of communism is for the working class to actually build a society that benefits itself, whereas the goal of capitalism is profit. Exclusively. Like, sacrifice everything at the altar of profit. And if that means destroying the working class, then so be it. And I've said it over and over again. I would rather live in a country that is attempting to improve or attempting to tackle its problems and failing than live in a country that was making no attempt whatsoever. And that's capitalist society. Capitalist society is making no attempt whatsoever to improve upon the problems that it has. In fact, it's doing the opposite. It's exacerbating the problems. It's making the problems worse because it's profitable to do so. And it's a catastrophe, and it's going to continue being a catastrophe. China has enacted poverty. China has eradicated poverty and homelessness. Go to India, say the same thing. Oh, that's right, you can. I mean, I'll be very interested to see what happens in India over the next little while. I think India is getting ready to take, like, I think India has looked at the rise of China and has been like, whoa! I think that's basically what has happened in India. That China went, and India has just been like, whoa, 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 whoa. Because the history of India, the recent history of India, has been getting dominated by imperialist powers, right? And so I think India, as like a unit, has just looked at the rise of China and been like, oh shit, we're gonna get fucked. But that's starting to kind of like calm down a little bit. And I think Indians are starting to be like, oh, China's not gonna come over here and destroy us. They're not gonna just, they seem to be talking a game of trade. They seem to be interested in linking things and all of this. Okay. Okay. And that's essentially where I think India is right now. The kind of hands up, going, oh, okay. Okay. So still suspicious, still feeling very threatened and traumatized, because China's rise was very fast and very swift. And India watched it happen. Like, it's not like us where we're dumb and illiterate, we don't know anything, right? India watched it fucking happen, but they've also joined into BRICS. They're also getting linked into the Belt and Road Initiative. They're also moving forward in trade and all of this. And I think that any country that's near China right now has it's a win-win. Like, even if you believe that the leadership is like psychopathic, narcissistic, Machiavellian, death lords, well, or they're like super egalitarian, love the world, hug a bear kind of people. In either case, joining the Belt and Road Initiative and linking yourself up to this huge trade organization is a win, right? It's a massive win. Either you're like, I'm enriching myself and probably lots of other people in the society, or you're like, hey, let's link up to the thing and improve the quality of life for the citizenry. So what's going to happen in India over the next 30 years, maybe even less than that, 20 years, is going to be very interesting to see. Very, very interesting to see. And if they can realize some political potential, if they can get the political will, get rid of the fascists that exist in their political system, and start to rule in a more egalitarian sort of, with a more egalitarian sort of outlook, serious things can happen in India, and it can happen very quick. China has proven that very serious things can happen over a very short period of time. To me, that's the major success of China. That what China has really shown the rest of the world over the last 20 years is that you can dramatically change things very fast. This idea of slow, piecemeal, just over centuries, if not even longer than that, things will eventually change in a direction. China has just been like, what are you talking about? Here's 12 cities out of nowhere. Literally just like, done. We built them. Like, nobody stopped us. What are you going to do? Right? I love it. So, Romeo. Dude, if you actually want to talk to me, come over to YouTube, okay, bud? For real. It's in the description. Just come over to YouTube. It's easy, right? It's super, super easy. And if you prove to me that you are literate over a very, very quick period. Yeah, imagine defending China. Yeah, you're watching it happen. China's a beautiful country. China's a beautiful country. Has done really well by its citizens. It's very impressive. And the West has done nothing but lie about China. Done nothing but lie about China. The animals traded, Grinning says, the animals traded the human hierarchy for the pig hierarchy. It's an anti-authoritarian book. That's right. Oh, we're talking about 1984. Got it. I've been to Cuba to play baseball, and the Cuban people are beautiful, in my humble opinion. Yeah, dude. The Cuban people are beautiful people, man. Really are beautiful people. If you ask me, the thing that is holding the Cubans back is just their lack of tools. That's it. That when I was in Cuba, I was seeing the Cubans do fairly complex tasks with really rudimentary tools. And they just don't have access to the markets, right? Like they've basically only been permitted to sell a couple of luxury goods to like Europe and Canada in exchange for food, basically. Like that's the level of trade that they've been permitted by the embargo, by the American embargo, right? And the American embargo basically conceded to their allies, like, okay, we'll let you get access to cigars and sugar, like or rum, I should say, not sugar. If it was sugar, it'd be like huge, it'd be way bigger. But we'll let you have access to like these basic luxury goods because you're our allies, and we want our rich allies to have access to these luxury goods that are coming out of Cuba. And in exchange, we'll give them a little bit of grain so they don't just starve on our doorstep. And that seems to be the concession. But like when I was in Cuba, like they had entire factories that were just not operating because they're like, yeah, why bother? Like we'll make this and sell it to who? So they've got this productive capacity. They've got this stuff already built and ready to go. If you care about Cuba at all, the thing that you should be demanding is lifting the embargo. That's what you should be demanding. Like if you have a human soul inside of your heart at all, you should be saying, yeah, lift that embargo, right? Like it's weird how all of the capitalist simps will say, oh, communism collapsed and communism never works and all this kind of stuff. Well, why are we spending all the money to prevent it then? Like if communism just collapses, then just let it, right? Just stand back and watch it happen. That's what happens, right? That communism collapses. Well, then just let it, right? And then everybody will go, oh, this didn't work. Oh, well, we got to do this capitalism thing. That's obviously the right thing to do, right? But instead of that, we're spending hundreds of billions of dollars to absolutely decimate these places and ensure that they can't possibly work. Well, why? So it's this incoherent thinking that comes out of capitalist supporters, these capitalist simps, that it just doesn't make any sense at all. It's that same kind of intellectual level that's like, oh, you're a communist, but you're using an iPhone that capitalism made. And it's like, no, I'm using an iPhone that workers made. And complaining that why is it that these guys that didn't do any of the work, that didn't actually build the iPhone, that didn't actually build any of this stuff, why are they the primary beneficiaries? They didn't do anything, right? They literally just own a piece of paper that says they own the company, and that gives them all this wealth for no fucking reason that I can see. Yeah, remember the mysterious hand of the market. Ligand Disease says, I recall watching Bald and Bankrupt's video traveling to Moldova and encountering some elders who said they want to return to the USSR. The place is run down. Yeah, I mean, it's being in a place like Moldova would be really tough. Like the collapse of the Soviet Union and and sort of the reverberations of that have obviously been very difficult for Eastern Europe. Grinning says, I'm not hopeful on India. The political energy is in the ownership class. You have big owners versus small. At least that's all I ever hear. I think that's right. Yeah, I think that's right. But I think my point is that it's becoming really obvious, even to the ownership class, that by standing against this rising Chinese force, they are hurting not just the workers and the underclass, but they're also hurting themselves. And that's sort of what I was saying with this, like, if they're psychopaths or egalitarian lovey-dovey guys, that the choice is sort of the same. That getting connected to the Chinese markets, starting to build productive capacity, opening up trade to China, starting to use more resources and exploit resources more, right? Like it's right in front of them, and you kind of have to choose not to do it at this point, and there's no real reason to choose not to do it. You're basically like, if you believe that the people who are ruling India are just self-interested Machiavellian psychos, then you're basically saying, oh, those guys don't want more money for themselves? They don't want more wealth for themselves? Of course they do, right? So I think it's going to happen no matter what. No matter what. MR, I just don't know enough about Yugoslavia. I don't know enough about it to comment on it. I do know that, like, Americans were fucking that place up. Like, that was the whole Kosovo thing. Like, America went in there and fucked things up militarily. So chances are good that the communist system there was working. Right? That's usually the narrative. That a culture, a society puts together some kind of Marxist principles, puts forward an economy based on Marxist principles that actually starts working for its citizens in a more egalitarian way, acting as a model for neighboring countries, acting as a model for the rest of the world to look at and be like, oh, this is actually working for them. And it's outside of the sphere of the capitalist structure, and it's outside of this kind of thing. And that's what America can't tolerate, right? That's the reason why America invades places. Like, America invades Vietnam. Like, Vietnam is the case in point. Like, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, right? It was a time when they invaded a country nakedly to destroy communism. It was nakedly stated. They openly were talking about, we are going in there to staunch the spread of communism. That was the only reason they did this, because they saw China as a communist force rising on the world stage, and they knew that Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia could follow, and so they went in and absolutely blow the place apart, right? And so I suspect the similar thing happened in Yugoslavia, right? I suspect that narrative follows suit. That's what happened in Libya, right? Where they started to create a more egalitarian society based on Marxist principles, and they were just like, no, we won't tolerate this. We're going to blow this up. And they did. Like, that's how it works. Oh yeah, speaking of Cuba and Lula, y'all see Lula call for the sanctions to be dropped? Yeah, apparently the kids call that based. The cool kids, if I understand. The kids call that based. Very, very nice, Adam. Very nice. Just lean into the boomer talk, right? Apparently the kids call that based. MR says, while as a Croatian myself, we fought hardest ourselves to fend off all Serbian attacks, genocides, and horrors, so many people have agreed that the Croatian War of Independence was the bloodiest. Yeah, I mean, again, dude, like, I don't actually have, like, I don't know enough to really talk about it. I've got kind of a broad stroke. Because it's interesting how this has become like a blind spot for me. This conversation, I should read more, and I think today has really convinced me that my next reading project is to brush up on what happened in Yugoslavia, because I was just too young. I was like not really cognizant or aware of what was going on in the world. I seem to remember like Bill Clinton and Kosovo, and like this was a thing, but I don't really remember what happened. I don't really, and I certainly wasn't like a communist at that point. Like, and so, and it wasn't until later that I started to become more aware, and there's so much more going on in the world at the time, like as it's happening, that's what's taken my attention. And so what's gone on in Yugoslavia is something that is always kind of been a blind spot for me, and I've never really rectified it. But you're not the first person today even to be talking about Yugoslavia. So I think this has convinced me that I should probably do some reading and do some brushing up. And I mean, Isaac, I think exactly what you say is probably correct, right? Bill Clinton has a huge mountain of dead bodies in Yugoslavia. Like, why be involved? Like that and it's a pattern of behavior for the Americans, right? This is from MR again. Yugoslavia was full of ethnic cleansing and war crimes. I can't say America did a good job in Yugoslavia, even as a Croatian, I'm saying that. But we fought what he had to? Do you mean we had to? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and you know what, MR, there is this, like, there is just like a bloody reality of, like, sometimes it really just does come down to you got to do what you got to do. That, yeah, very good. That they're, like, we can have theoretical, this is something I very strongly believe in, just on a human level. And my fellow communists and I get into real tiffs about this, because this is something that I my background is like theater and arts and the humanities, and so I tend to take a more that kind of base human perspective, and whereas a lot of people, especially on the left, can get caught in a more theoretical framework and forget that there is just eventually a point where your theoretical ideological framework is meaningless, that there are people kicking in your door and someone's going to pick up a gun and shoot back, and I don't give a shit. Like, if I was living in a country that was experiencing conflict and violence, and I had a weapon, and someone was kicking in my door in order to get me, I wouldn't give two shits at all what their ideological framework was. I wouldn't care for a minute about, oh, well, is this a fascist kicking in my door, or is this a what is this a capitalist? Is this a socialist? I wouldn't care at all, and nobody would. That the person who's kicking in your door, you're going to shoot them. You're going to shoot back. You're not going to just let them kick in your door and get you. And I feel like you are way closer to that reality and that experience than probably anybody else in the chat right now, for sure. And so that's something I always defer to. I always let the people who were experiencing that reality have the floor, because that to me matters the most. MR says we essentially had no choice, fight ourselves. I just agree with Croatian being a republic and running our own government our own way, and leave their Serbians alone still today. Serbia can do what they want. We leave them alone and run their country how they want. Both sides happy. Right. Well, with that, I'm going to take a little moment, have a little pee break. Hope you guys are all doing well out in TikTok land. I'm going to be right back. Ugh, I'm such an old man. Such an old man. Dun dun dun. Thanks, radio. Don't get caught in your zipper. Oh, sorry, grinning. Sorry. I forget that sometimes people have earbuds in. I'm sorry if I destroyed anyone's ears. Sorry, my bad. Well, what was I doing? I was peeing, and so I sing instead. So instead of you guys hearing me peeing, you hear me sing. That's what I'm doing. So PSAC, which is the Union of Federal Public Service Workers, is launching a nationwide strike vote for more than 120,000 federal public service workers after talks broke down over wages and other key issues. Strike votes will be conducted from February 22nd to April 19th. This is also an important time to say that here in Toronto, we are having there is a protest going on at Queen's Park, 11 a.m., February 21st. And I'm actually going to be able to attend finally for once. So hopefully a lot of people show up. And I'm actually seeing that protest get spread around on the socials and on TikTok and these sorts of places. So I'm hoping that that's going to be a big bibbidi-bobbidi-boo. A big shticky-doo. Command Genius. Fun fact, with Bill C-11, the Senate snuck in an age verification on platforms, which forces you to upload your private government ID to most websites. You know, man, I have a bit of a controversial take on the idea of on the internet. Is that I'm not completely convinced that this anonymity thing that we've done on the internet is a good idea. I'm not entirely convinced that this was the best way to do things. You know? That, like, allowing people to just exist on social media platforms, on websites, on these sorts of things, as just anonymous, who are these people kind of stuff. Is that good for us as a people? Is that a smart way to do communication? Is this a smart way to exist on the internet or on these platforms? And like some of the stuff I think about in terms of the internet, like how absolutely cool would it be if there were like, I'll give like a really rudimentary example, like a really like almost childish example of kind of what I'm talking about. Like, wouldn't it be super cool if there was a government agency or a crown corporation or something that was in control of like FIFA? You know the FIFA games, like soccer FIFA, so instead of like releasing a soccer game every year, there's like a government organization that just maintains a server that's a FIFA server, that it just updates with new players or it updates with the game. Maybe even the code is open source so people can like manipulate it and change it themselves, right? Constantly updating it and all of that. And it's like built into the governmental structure. So there's just like an open source, freely available FIFA game that anyone can join. So instead of having this constant hamster wheel of being in this capitalist shit of like buy a new one every year in order to play with your friends or whatever, right? You've got it and it's just there and you can have it. Like one of the cool things that has happened because of the internet recently is that there's like a library of old games, like any of the DOS games, any of the old games that nobody will buy, like nobody's going to pay for this, right? Because like the tech has just gotten so crazy. But if you want to go play some of this old stuff, it's just on the internet, right? And like we're going to get that way, but with like today's games. And so I feel like we should have like a library. We should have like a video game library that people can just get access to this stuff, you know? No, I'm not suggesting that private information be public. Just maybe it would be a better idea if like users were verified. Although I understand the counter to this, which is like, so we got a bunch of communists in here right now, and so everybody like, so your name is there now. And if the government turns on communists, well, how easy would it be to just round you guys up? You know what I mean? So I understand that. It's not fully fleshed out. I'm not willing to double down on any of it. But I'm not entirely convinced that simple anonymity, like Generation has said, anonymity online is a good thing. I'm like, is it? Like, is it a good thing? I'm not 100% convinced, because it does definitely empower trolls. Like, it does definitely make trolling a thing. But in any case, it's not something I care to really, really double down on and go too hard into. And I'm 100% sure that someone's furiously tapping into chat right now. Speaking of FIFA, right? Speaking of FIFA, Toronto's big gamble. The city is putting aside millions for World Cup 2026, despite a cash crunch. Like, why are we like this? Why are we like this? Where here in the city of Toronto, we're in a housing crisis. Like, I've got a chart right here that actually shows you how bad the housing crisis is. That in the city of Toronto, it takes 113% of the average earner's income in order to rent a house, in order to get a house. Like 113. So if you took all of your money, all of your income, and gave it, put it towards your house, you need 13% more. Like the very definition of unaffordable. And this is like across Canada, so it's not a uniquely Toronto kind of thing. Like in Victoria, it's 83%. The lowest that they've got here is Saskatoon, which is 45%. So almost half your income needs to go to your housing if you want to have a house in Canada. But in Toronto, it's absolutely blistering. And in the midst of this, where we have this housing crisis going on, what is it that our government is prioritizing? What is it that we're actually like doubling down on and being like, oh man, we got to do this. We got to get the World Cup. We got to make sure the World Cup so that millionaires can kick a leather ball into a net. Let's make sure that those millionaires kick that leather ball into that net the best they possibly can. Forget about the homeless people sleeping in the streets. They need to just get better jobs, even though they're already working jobs. We gotta make sure that we're putting as much money towards getting these millionaires to kick these balls into nets. It's just fucking ridiculous. It's just fucking ridiculous what we're doing. Like, this is like baby brain. This is the kind of thing that I think of when people come in here being like, capitalism's great, you just need to work harder. Like, we're literally funneling money into like kids sports. Like, that's what this is. Like, I'm sure that the people who do it are very good at it. They're very good at running around an open field, kicking a leather ball towards one another and into a net. Like, I'm sure they're the best and they're inspirational. They're the greatest at wearing little shorts and running around and making a big fuss when then somebody hits them with their elbow and all that. Right? I'm absolutely sure that all of the things that are good about sports are embodied in the spirit of the blah 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 blah. Absolutely fine, right? Like, but all of that, it's still baby brain. Like, you're just making a big deal about something that is like a kid's sport. That is like, now we're going to take, instead of taking millions of dollars and putting it into housing, instead of taking millions of dollars and putting it into social programs, into healthcare, instead of taking millions of dollars and putting it towards anything else, we're going to take those millions of dollars and make sure we get the best possible stadium built so that those millionaires can kick a ball. Like, I like commie blocks, very livable. My favorite thing that's ever been said about them is like, what's more ugly than commie blocks? Homelessness, bro. Homelessness is uglier than commie blocks. Like, yeah, they look ugly because they were trying to quickly solve a problem. And they did. They quickly solved the problem. Like, you think about where rent is right now, right? You think about like rent. Like most of my money goes to rent right now. You know, like it's a huge amount of my income goes towards my rent. And I take a look at what the rent was like in the Soviet Union. The rent was 4% of your income. They tied rent to income. They said 4% of a person's income went to rent, and that's the highest you could do it. And I was just like, dude, if 4% of my income was going to rent and that was it, I'd be laughing. I'd be singing the moon. I'd be talking about how great this system is. My life would improve instantaneously. I would be like it would be like a breath of air. It would be like my lungs filling with air. If 4% of my income was all that could be charged for rent. But and think about the huge economic boom of it. Instead of all of our money being siphoned off into a parasitical class that achieves nothing and does nothing important, it would be going into your local economies. You'd be spending money locally. You'd be traveling more. You'd be doing all kinds of stuff. Like we're just clamping down on our economy so that fucking we gotta make sure that this guy can kick that ball in that net. Yeah, that's right. In Vancouver, people are renting a room and sharing the room with other people because of the high cost of housing. Yeah, it's fucking ridiculous. Like, it's so stupid and unnecessary, pointless, grotesque, and here we are spending money so, you know, oh, but Messi's gonna kick the ball real good. I sadly benefit from capitalism, says Command Genius. I mean, we all are tied up in the system. We are either beneficiaries, like these guys who love to say, like, well, if you love communism so much, why do you move to a communist country? It's like, one of the reasons why not, bro, is because we tend to bomb those places. Like, one of the benefits of living in a capitalist country is that the capitalists are less likely to bomb themselves. It's not that they don't. They often do. But in terms of the scale and how often it occurs, it's nothing compared to how much we bomb communist countries, right? So if I were to move to one of these communist countries, I'd probably just get bombed. So safer to stay on this side of the fence is the hard truth and the hard reality, right? So in that way, I guess we are all quote-unquote beneficiaries of this capitalist system because we're not being actively bombed by capitalists right now. Unlike places like, let's say, Afghanistan, Iraq, right? You know, the Yemen, Somalia, very recently Somalia, Ethiopia. Like, many of my disabled friends have been getting $325 in rent for a month for the last 15 years. Jesus Christ, man. $325 a month, eh? You can't find a room for that price, dude. The price of 12 eggs in Canada is $4.31, while in Russia, who are supposed to be sanctioned, it's only $1. Hey, Base, how you doing, bud? Good to see you. Yeah, I would also need to learn the language and culture of a communist society too. Yeah, you don't know anybody. There's that aspect of it. It's not free to move, right? Like the plane ticket alone, you got to get set up in a space, set up in a room. Like it's just such a dumb thing to say. Like there are a handful of things that if a person says to me, I can basically just say, you're just a person whose opinion I could ignore. And that's definitely one of them. Well, if you love communism so much, why do you move there? It's like, think about it for 2 seconds. Like, actually move the wheels in your brain and think about why that's not possible for someone like me. Right? And probably not possible for most people. The idea of just like, yeah, just pick up everything, leave your life, leave your friends, leave your family, learn a new language, learn a new culture, integrate into the society and the culture of another civilization, have the money to be able to do that, and try not to die. Except that's the reason they say it. Essentially what they're saying is just go die. Like, they just don't have the courage to actually say it. Like, it's just something that a coward says. And the fact eggs cost $10 a dozen and milk $5 is nothing in this nation, it's not worth burning no one. Yeah, we're getting there, man. Like, we're getting there. Things are just, and it's going to continue accelerating. And the contradictions that are inherent in capitalism are going to get more obvious. Stories like this, where like we're spending money so a guy can kick a ball into a net, are going to become more outrageous. Like, when is the let them eat cake moment going to happen, right? Like, is it this? Is it Doge Cat wearing 30,000 hand-applied Swarovski crystals? Like, when does it actually happen? And Base says, oh, I'd love to move to a communist state, but the argument that I should alone has genocidal, I don't want you around tone by itself. Yeah, that's the other thing. I wasn't going to say it, but you said it, which is like, it is like quasi-genocidal, right? That people who are of a different political belief system than mine should be physically relocated. Like, it's definitely like fascist adjacent. Like, it's definitely like, oh, okay, weirdo. Like, you don't like, love it or leave it. Love it or leave it. Even as we bomb other countries and commit slavery on our own population. Love it or leave it. Like, it's, maybe not. Speaking of neo-Nazis, from Vice, neo-Nazis are hosting MMA and boxing tournaments to recruit new members. Isn't that great? On a small warehouse in Southern California, the neo-Nazis cheered as two of their own beat on each other. On one side of the ring was a fighter repping a local active club, the innocuous phrase used to describe a neo-Nazi athletic club, and the other side, a fighter representing Patriot Front, a prominent neo-fascist organization. It was the headlining fight at birth of a new frontier, an event hyped up as the first of its kind, white supremacist fighting tournament in the United States. Outside the ring was a cacophony of black metal music, supplemental stands, and juiced-up neo-Nazis milling about and talking shop. It didn't matter who won in the ring for the neo-Nazis. The event, the camaraderie, and the violence were a victory in and of itself. A victory that white nationalists are hoping is a sign of more fascist fight nights to come. Something they believe means more in real-life networking, community building, and, overall, a stronger white nationalist scene. Since Birth of a New Frontier back in August 2022, at least one more neo-Nazi fight tournament has been held in the U.S., and organizers have been promising more. Neo-Nazi MMA or boxing tournaments aren't a new phenomenon, and they've been particularly present in Europe over the past few years. As far back as 2008, neo-Nazi influencer and football hooligan Dennis Nikitin has led White Rex, a clothing and lifestyle company that is frequented by the far right and has hosted multiple MMA events. There are also groups active in Germany, France, and Greece that frequently utilize MMA as a networking and recruitment tool. And now, after a brief hiatus, the same movement is resurging across the Atlantic. One man, Robert Rundo, an American neo-Nazi currently living in Europe, has had an extensive influence on the Western push. In the latter half of 2022, at least two high-profile white supremacist fighting tournaments and a grappling tournament put on by a Brazilian jiu-jitsu school with neo-fascist ties took place in the U.S. On August 20th, an aforementioned Birth of a New Frontier took place in Southern California, organized primarily by the SoCal Active Club, Will to Rise, Rundo's organization, and Patriot Front. Left Coast Right Watch covered the event and determined that the fighters came from across the United States, including traveling as far away as Philadelphia. In the crowd, LCRW spotted Thomas Rousseau, the leader of the Patriot Front, as well as a few other well-known far-right figures. The event was promoted by other fascist organization. Then, in December, as first reported by Daily Kos, an active club tricked a venue in Pasco, Washington, the Hapo Center, into hosting a tournament. The event, dubbed the Martyrs' Day Rumble, was meant to celebrate white supremacist terrorist Robert Matthews, who led the violent neo-Nazi gang, The Order. The Order committed several robberies and was behind the assassination of Jewish talk show host Alan Berg in 1984. Those in charge of the Hapo Center told Daily Kos that after the event was shut down early once it came to light what was occurring, and that they were contacted by law enforcement afterwards. Devotion Jiu-Jitsu, a grappling school connected to the Wolves of Vinland, a neo-fascist organization based in Lynchburg, Virginia, whose members have been connected to arson of a black church and a recent robbery conspiracy, held a tournament in July called Blood on the Mats. While the event was not as explicit in its politics as the other two, organizers of the event have strong ties to the white nationalist scene. The extremist right is always trying to find new avenues to insinuate itself into the mainstream, and this is just the latest. David Newert, a journalist who has reported on the extreme right in the United States for decades, told Vice News, "It really just means that yet another segment of mainstream life, the people who run gyms and public venues, now will have to learn how to identify these toxic scam artists and what they stand for. Hopefully, there will be a proactive campaign to spread the word." The fight events are not intended to be mere athletic competitions, but network and community-building events. Much like National Socialist black metal festivals, they are places for white supremacists from different groups to gather, commiserate, and plan. The use of MMA or BJJ-type events as a meeting space for white nationalists, white supremacists, and neo-fascist accelerationists is a predictable tactic, said Matthew Kreiner, the managing director of the Accelerationism Research Consortium. Historically, white power music concerts served the same function of plausible deniability to convene in the public space without heightened scrutiny or pushback from communities. This pattern today, and the organizing role that active clubs play, illustrates the centrality of neo-fascist accelerationist actors in driving offline hate-based activity. The events also work as fundraisers for the organizers and groups. In multiple portions of a promotional video made by the neo-Nazis to mark the California tournament, a merch table is visible. Daily Kos reported that following the Martyrs' Day Rumble, the organizer hawked t-shirts. Rundo has been the driving force behind the growth of active clubs, both directly and indirectly. He is the former leader of the neo-Nazi street-fighting group Rise Above movement, and has been charged with several crimes in connection with them in the United States, but is currently in Europe. Experts believe he'll likely stay there rather than come home and risk prison time. Rundo said in a recent interview these events are an attempt to build something, a whole underground culture, a parallel society. With that goal in mind, Rundo has been rapidly and tirelessly growing both the brand and chapters of the active clubs, and that includes plans for further tournaments. If you have any information regarding neo-Nazi organizing, the Wolves of Vinland, or active clubs, we would love to hear from you. Please reach out to Max Lemo or Sam Egan via email at maxlemo@vice.com and samegan@vice.com, or on Twitter at maxlemo and Sam Egan. More of these events are going to happen, said Rundo in a recent YouTube video. They're going to be moving from state to state. We're going to be doing more and more. There's going to be more and more active clubs. It's going to be the street culture of white nationalism. Rundo started his latest venture, a white nationalist fraternal network under the guise of local fitness clubs, only a few short years ago. These active clubs are intended to work alongside neo-Nazis and neo-fascist groups. While not necessarily a revolutionary idea, neo-Nazi and far-right fitness clubs and fight clubs have been around for decades. The venture appears to have taken off. A non-comprehensive look on Telegram, where active clubs recruit and organize, show upwards of 25 clubs across the world, and experts told Vice News the true number is likely much higher. The decentralized nature of the groups allow each to be shaped to their local community, meaning the clubs can greatly differ in size and style. These clubs aren't just connected to the modern neo-Nazi movement, but to the past. An investigation by the Canadian Anti-Hate Network found that many active clubs had involvement with the Hammerskins, a white supremacist gang that has been active since the late 80s. For example, the organizer of the active club fight tournament in Pasco is a skinhead who did 4 years in prison for stabbing an interracial couple. Another organizer and founding member of Rundo's media wing, Media to Rise, Alan Michael Goff, was charged and later acquitted of felony assault and a hate crime after allegedly shooting a Latino teen. The events and active clubs have been noticed by figures across the neo-Nazi ecosystem. Ronaldo Nazzaro, the American but Russian-based founder of the neo-Nazi terror group The Base, weighed in on the clubs in recent weeks on his Telegram page. He said while he likes the club's focus on street fighting, he hopes they'll expand their goals. Being able to knock out Antifa during a street protest is undoubtedly fun and cool, but that's not enough, he wrote on Telegram. Securing a future for our people will be necessarily require our securing our own territory that's independent from the system's authority. Despite the athletic clubs lacking the militaristic vision of Nazzaro, they're proving to be popular. Events like these tournaments only work to strengthen both their internal and external networks. They're building a community with the goal of battling much more than just other white supremacists in combat sports. The biggest battle in this conflict is for the hearts and minds of our people, Rundo stated on Telegram. After that, everything else is easy. I like this grinning. No need to punch Nazis anymore. They punch themselves. I can see how it'd be like a real rite of passage, right? Take a beating. It's like classic sort of prison thinking. Yeah. Isaac, my own family tells me, why don't you move to a communist country if you like them so much? I replied to them, the reason I don't move is because I don't want to be bombed by the West. Yeah, that should become just the standard, like, I don't want to be bombed by America. Like, yeah, let's see some black fighters join those and see how fast the arena gets aired out again, yeah. Jason Tharp, don't know if I've ever seen you here before, Jason, hope it's a beautiful comment. Valid arguments against the problems of capitalism is not automatically an argument in favor of communism. Yeah, I think that's true, right? I think that there are plenty of people in the conversation who consider themselves like social democrats, more left-wing types. Oh, looks like my battery's going to go on TikTok, so I'm just going to... You know what? The last half hour will be inside baseball. Good to see you, TikTok. Hope you're all doing really well out there. God bless each and every one of you. Much love, much love. Good luck out there. Farewell, TikTok. And they're gone. Yeah, we did great. Yeah. 6,741 viewers, 2,400 likes, 692 comments. Yep. TikTok, man. It's wild. It's wild. To your point, Jason, yeah, I think like I think that social democrats are the more common one, right? Right now, progressives are the more common one. That you've got lots of people like AOC, the NDP generally right now in Canada. Tax the rich is a big slogan that's coming out of the progressive left. And of course, but I have my criticisms of them as progressives, right? And as left-leaning social democrats. But so you're right. But that just adds spice to the conversation, right? It'll be funny when a person of color enters the tournament and crushes these chinless whites. Yeah. I mean, I suspect that what will actually happen is that these groups will start to regurgitate out fighters who will make it into venues like the UFC that you'll have like white supremacists at the top levels of these sorts of combat sports, and they will start to fight people of color in that venue as a white supremacist, and it'll be well known that they're a white supremacist. They'll have tattoos that are white supremacist, and they'll fight, and that will this conversation about these white supremacists fighting people of color will play out in the gladiatorial ring of places like the UFC. Like, it's just a matter of time. And people like Dana White and the leaders of the UFC will just be like, we're just interested in fighting. I'm not getting involved in any politics here. This guy's the best fighter I've seen, and he's going to go in there and fight. And if you don't like what he says, then you can beat him. And that's what they'll say. And that's basically a verbatim quote for the future. And that'll be the position of Dana White, and that's all he'll say about it. What were you doing, Marie? You just got here from tossing off trolls on my TikTok? Were you on TikTok? Don't be on TikTok, Marie. Come here. I don't go on TikTok. I just roll it on TikTok so sometimes people will come in. Right? Oh well, good for you, Marie. That's trooperism, right? That's you being a fucking... You're taking that on, man. Like, I don't do that. Like, TikTok is wild, man. Like, it's just... Yeah, I feel you, Marie. I feel you. I've been there myself. Sometimes you just want to put your head down and just grind in, right? And I understand that. I mean, my opinion of TikTok and the TikTok chat generally is it's just very young. It's just very young. Like, I remember when I was 14. Like, I wasn't, like, the coolest person ever. And, I mean, yeah, fascism is very popular right now. It's a very popular ideology at the moment. Yeah, militarization of the left is required by this point. Yeah, like, the right is militarizing. Like, and creating like little social clubs where they beat each other up, where they train how to fight, right? Like, that's obviously what they're doing. Vinland is a reference to what the Vikings called North America, Newfoundland. So fucking LARPy, yeah. Yeah. I mean, come on, man. Like, the Ku Klux Klan was like, literally these guys are like, I am the Grand Dragon Vizier of the Ku Klux Klan. Like white supremacists have always been weirdly LARPy. Right? They've always been that way. I can read, by the way, so what are you talking about? Communism or crazy idiot skinheads with mummy issues? I mean, sometimes I think there are articles that are important to read and bring into the public space and to air in a public way. Like, it's not enough for me to... Sometimes it is... And also, Jason, I just like to read. It's as simple as that. I just like to do it. Like, and it's not enough for me to be like, here it is, go read it if you want. Sometimes I want to read it and have it out in the public, right? It seems as if you do not believe capitalism can be structured in a way to continue its phenomenal wealth and innovative creating ability. So, a couple of things there, Jason. One, it's never been a system that creates wealth or innovation. It's never been that. That what it has always been is a system that extracts wealth and value from other peoples. So the building of America was done because of black slavery and the genocide of the First Nations people. That wealthy British landowners who got their wealth by exploiting their own people and enslaving and conscripting huge sections of their own populace, not to mention like the clear cutting of Britain that happened. So capitalism has never been generating wealth for black slaves or for First Nations people. Certainly not the Incans or the Mayans, right? Or the Aztecs, literal civilizations that were wiped away by capitalist expansion, right? And so those people certainly don't view capitalism as a phenomenal wealth or innovative creating ability. Like the Indians who experienced like a massive genocide by the British certainly don't see capitalism as this phenomenal wealth and innovative creating ability. That's just what capitalists say so that you won't actually go, oh, no, no, this isn't about generating wealth. This is about transferring wealth. That's what capitalism does. Capitalism doesn't generate wealth. It transfers wealth. It extracts wealth. You just happen to be on the side of the beneficiary of that arrangement. And that's coming to an end, right? That's coming to an end because the capitalists are running out of places to exploit. They're running out of resources. They're running out of places to go, right? And so they're going to turn the eye away from outside of the borders, and they're going to turn it internally. And that's already begun. That process has already begun. Like if you're a Detroit auto manufacturer in the 80s, you already know and understand well what the capitalist system is willing to do. You already are well aware that the capitalists are more than happy to abandon you, right? So that they can make an extra dollar for themselves. And so this idea that capitalism ever was about generating phenomenal wealth, essentially what you are saying is that I'm going to walk up to a guy with a gun and say, give me your money. And then when he gives me my money, I say, man, what a wonderful phenomenal wealth and innovative tool to generate as much wealth for myself as possible. This is great. Everyone should do this. I don't really take that position very seriously. Elon has worked hard to create wealth. Hilarious. That's just hilarious, dude. Elon Musk was born a billionaire. His father made his wealth in apartheid South Africa. So Elon Musk is literally a hereditary billionaire based off of African apartheid. Like literally. So this idea that Elon Musk worked hard to create his wealth is a joke on the face of it. And then all Elon Musk has actually done from that is take his billions and then just buy his way upwards, right? And Elon Musk is one of the great grifters of our time. Like, he's not actually achieving anything, and he's holding us back in major ways. Like, instead of actually moving on high-speed rail, which is what the Chinese have been doing for the last 20 years, Elon Musk bribed politicians in California to not do high-speed rail and instead do this Hyperloop shit, which is like a failure and a half. It's just like a total idiotic, moronic catastrophe that people are going to look at in the future and be like, what the fuck is this carnival bullshit? Why is it necessary to tear someone down to make the system better? Yeah, why is it necessary to get rid of kings in order to claim power for the serfs? Like, why is that necessary? Because if you don't, then you're always just going to be in this pattern of subservience. Like, the only reason you think capitalism has any benefit at all is because it hasn't actively abandoned you yet. Yeah, it hasn't kicked your door in. That's it. That's the only reason you're still standing up and thinking capitalism has any validity whatsoever. That as long as it's kicking down other people's doors, as long as it's abandoning other people, as long as it's going into other countries and destroying those countries and extracting their resources and shipping them to your town, as long as they're going around murdering other people, as long as they're going around destroying other groups, capitalism's the best. But the moment it kicks in your door, the moment it throws you into the street, you'll start to think otherwise. And don't think it won't, because it definitely will. Fair enough on the reading. Yeah, thank you. Are you open to housing prices being capped at 4% of a wage? Does that work? Fuck yeah. Collapse this housing market, dude. Get rid of this housing market. I think that a housing market is just it's just abhorrent. Like, fucking get rid of it. And if that means like, oh no, my investments, and oh my god, I'm not saying, great. Fuck your investments. Get fucked. Housing should not be an investment. Yeah, I am very competent at inheriting daddy's money. Exactly. It is the only system? That's like some end of history stuff, dude. Like, it is most definitely not the only system. why is China running a capitalist economy within a communist central government system? That's a good question. What the Chinese did was very brilliant. They opened their market, and there was internal debate, let's say, in the nicest way, internal debate between the Maoists and the Dangists when that transition happened. Because the Maoist perspective was to remain not isolated, but definitely just keep things going as they are. Stay within the confines of a strictly communist, not interacting with capital systems. But the Dangists and the majority of people within China began to see that this is going to lead to isolationism, and we need to open up our borders to trade. And the only way to successfully trade with markets that are largely capitalist is to allow a certain section of your populace and a certain section of your economy to be capitalist. And it's been wildly successful because the Americans essentially deindustrialized to give China their industrial base. Like, the Chinese Communist Party didn't need to build an industrial base. The Americans did it for them. Right? Like, why would you say no to this? And it's been wildly successful. So the Americans ship their industry over to China. This turns into an engine that the Chinese then take and use the wealth generated by that to build their economy and build their society in a strong and powerful way. And it's petering out. Like, it's not going to last forever. And the Chinese know that. And so that's going to go into the next phase of what China's going to look to do. But this is something that's pretty established in the literature. Even Lenin talked about this. That along the journey towards socialism and then towards communism, you need a period of capitalist growth. That it is like the first stage of actually building up towards communism and towards socialism. The difference is that in China, they don't just allow billionaires to just sit on wealth forever, perpetually, offshoring it and siphoning it away from the society. Like, China's a lot smarter than we are in this regard. And they're not fundamentalists. Like, they're going to look at a statement like what you said and be like, yeah, well, what are you going to do? Like, they're not going to be like, oh, you're right, we're allowing a certain degree of capitalism in, and so now we're no longer interested in communism because we have to be pure. That's not how they think. They're like, oh, well, this is what we need to do to get to where we want to go, then we're going to do it. And it's completely working. Like, it's completely working. Yeah, no amount of hard work will get you to where Elon is. Yeah. Yeah, you are closer to being homeless than being a millionaire. Yeah, get out of your embarrassed millionaire mindset. Recognize you're working class like the rest of us. Yeah. Marie, once a while I rage. Marie, I cannot. Were you in that fucking TikTok chat that whole time? You mad woman, dude. You have my respect for sure. You have my respect for sure. Like, live long and prosper. Putin is denying the capitalists the last place to exploit in the world. Oh, yeah. No. The capitalists have a great place to exploit. It's called America. They're going to exploit the hell out of it. I just want to know what Jason's policy and plan would be for the spiking houses and rent prices. What is Jason's policy on this? Yeah. Capitalism has been the best wealth creation model in the history of humankind as long as you ignore slavery. Like, why are you ignoring the history of slavery, Jason? Like, they literally, like, scooped out Africa and South America. Like, they literally did that. You can see that very clearly with this chart I have right here. Like, it's very, very clear, right? If global wealth were distributed equally, the average person would be X times wealthier. It's no surprise that the European nations, Canada, the United States, right, would lose wealth, while South America, Africa, especially Africa, would gain, because that's where the wealth was stolen, right? Like, you're defending a system of like theft and calling what it's done some kind of legitimized wealth generation, when what it obviously is, very straightforwardly and clearly, is capitalists enslaving and committing genocide against people for free labor. Like, that's what it is. And to take the free labor from the enslaved people and use them to harvest resources for their benefit. Like, this is actually the system that you are currently defending. Like, and you're saying it has been the best wealth creation model in the history of humankind. It's a matter of objective facts. Like, you're just ignoring reality right now, dude. Like, are we getting into flat Earth territory? This feels like we're getting into flat Earth territory now. That the historical truth of what has actually happened in the world around you is not interesting because it's ruddering up against your kooky little ideology. Capitalism is the best wealth generation. It just is. Sorry, it just is. Sorry. No, sorry. The entire history of slavery and the genocide of the First Nations people and the extraction of wealth of all of those nations, none of that matters. Nope. It was capitalism that generated that wealth. Yup. That's what you sound like to me, bro. Like, just brain off, ideology on. I want sock dems to tell communists how the strongest modern contradictions can be fixed while preserving the pedestal of the owners of the means of production and needs. What is the plan? It's not abandoning people. Ask the people of Detroit, dude. Ask the people of Detroit. Humankind has brought more people out of poverty in the last decade than any other time in history. Yeah, China has done that. The Chinese Communist Party has done that. The Chinese Communist Party has done that. They took the wealth that was generated by their own labor, right? Yes, through private enterprise. 40% of their economy is private enterprise, 60% is state-run. And they took the benefits of the labor that they generated and they spread it into the populace, thereby eradicating poverty. And you seem to want to believe that it's capitalism that's done that, for whatever kooky little flat earth reason you have. Name the other system comparable to capitalism. Communism, bro. Like, the Soviets had the strongest economy of that century. First people into space, defeated the Nazis, right? Defeated the Nazis. The most powerful military in World War II at the time was the Nazis. Huge, enormous industrial capitalist economy defeated by the communists. Like, there goes your whole argument, dude. If capitalism's so great, then why do communists keep beating them? If capitalism's so great, then why is it that every single time a capitalist nation fights a communist nation, they lose? What's so great about your capitalist, like, force if it's so easy to fucking defeat? Yeah. Compton just keeps asking the same question, right? Like, how do people get homes? How do people get homes in this market, dude? Like, this great capitalist system of yours. Slavery was for most of history the rule, not the exception. Your argument is only logical if you go back to the beginning of human civilization to make reparations work. No, the history of American slavery is very specific to that period of time. Like, there are different variations and versions of systems of slavery that certainly existed through human history, but the history of black slavery is especially brutal. Like, especially brutal. And to follow your reasoning, does that mean we should be doing slavery now? So we should just keep doing slavery then. Right? So you admit that capitalism is a slave system. You admit that it's the best system and that we should continue doing a slave system. That's right? So why are you defending slavery? But China did not improve the poverty level humankind did. If you take China's numbers out of the eradication of poverty, it's almost nothing. Like, you're the one denying reality here, bud. Like, if you take China out of your equation, the situation has gotten worse for most people. Like, this is getting really cringy, dude. Like, you're standing here saying that we have a slave system. You've admitted to it. We've done slavery for most of human history, right? So we're still doing it. Capitalism is a slave system. You've admitted to it. So you want slavery to be a system, right? So why are you defending slavery? No, you just said it though, right? We can go take a look at it, right? Here it is. Slavery was for most of our history the rule, not the exception, including the capitalist period, right? So your argument is only logical if you go back to the human civilization to make reparations work. I've said nothing about reparations, but so capitalism was a slave system. We all agree to that. Capitalism's a slave system, right? So, and it hasn't stopped being that. Like, it still is that. That's what it's done. That's what it's still doing. That's what it's doing today. Like, it's other countries that have stopped using slave systems, which you deny, but I don't see why that has any validity. So, why are you supporting a system of slavery? Which you agree is a system of slavery. More brutal in the history of the Spanish, another capitalist nation. So, my point is that capitalism is a slave system. You've agreed with that. So why are you supporting slavery? And it's not hyperbole. It's not hyperbole at all. It's not even close to hyperbole. What the Americans and what the British did during the colonial period was literally eradicate entire civilizations of people. Like hundreds of thousands, millions of people just eradicated, enslaving others and forcing them to pick the cotton. Like, you can watch Roots. Like, it's all right there in front of you. And this is the slave system of capitalism that you admit it is and support. Why? You doing okay, Compton? You doing okay, Compton? You doing okay over there, bud? I worry about you, dude. Great. You're not really answering the question. Like, so what? Like, so capitalism is no, it's not. Capitalism is another slave system. You support it. Why? Why do you support slavery? I mean, yeah, the U.S. prison system, for God's sakes. Like, the U.S. prison system is a modern-day slave system, no doubt. I've got a great little thing right here. Privatized prisons lead to more inmates, longer sentences, study fines. I understand, Cotton. I'm reaching out to you right now. I'm reaching out to you, brother, across the negaverse. I'm reaching out with the hand of Marx. May he rest his hand upon your soul and alleviate from your heart the deep darkness of liberalism. I say unto thee, may Engels banish the demon of liberalism from you. In the name of the hammer and the sickle and the holy Marx. Yeah, Cotton's really nailing it here. They tell us we're wrong and then offer no working alternative except faith. Yeah, that's kind of the more embarrassing part about it. Is like they say you're wrong, but there's no alternative. It's just we have to accept it. This is just human nature, right? What are you gonna do, right? Even though there's all of the evidence that you could possibly see that you can change your governmental systems, you can change the way you operate, you can improve society, you can make things better, right? You can do it. No. We didn't stop slavery. We just institutionalized it more successfully, right? Like the private prison system in the United States. The United States has 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's prison population. And of that prison population, the vast majority are people of color. So it's just a new, like, and you're just saying it's hyperbole because you can't deal with it. Like, that's the truth. You just can't really deal with it. That the world is much bleaker and darker than you want to admit, and the society you live in is a monster that's going around destroying everyone. It's just not destroying you right now. No one supports slavery. I mean, you do, right? You said so, right? Right up here. Right up here. You said, where am I seeing it? It's not abandoning people. Capitalism has been the best wealth-creating model in the history of humankind. It did so through slavery, right? It's a matter of objective facts. Yeah, through slavery. That's how it did it, right? That's how it did it. We all know that's true. And they literally fought a civil war because of that. And where I mean, I think you're making no, Content is just like the rage fella. He's really just like, he spits nails so I don't. Is kind of how it is, Jason. Not nihilism for everyone. I mean, I would suggest that you're the most nihilistic person here, dude. Like, but by a lot, actually. It's like, communists are a hopeful lot. We actually believe that the world can change for the better and work to do that, right? Whereas liberals tend to just do a little bit of head tilting and sort of go, oh, that's bad for you. Oh, so sorry. Right? So sorry. But what about the gulags? Communists will only send people to the gulags. Like, I tend to agree that rent control is useful in the short term, but the problem with rent control is it can be easily... No, it was perfected. Like, slavery did not begin with capitalism, but definitely was perfected. Like, they really found a way to use it in the most brutal and efficient fashion. Like, the genocide of the Aztecs and the Mayans and the Incas and the Cree and the rest of the First Nations people, combined with the absolute commodification, the total dehumanization and the reduction of human life, is very special. It's very special what the Americans managed to do. And yeah. You just said the world is dark and I don't want to admit it. Yeah, correct. Like, you want to believe that the system that you live under is the end of history. That's what you want to believe. That this is it. You can't do better than this. And you want to believe that the reason why other nations that are run by communists have succeeded is because of capitalism and no other reason whatsoever. Like, that's it. Like, you don't actually want to admit what's true, which is that American imperialism is a system of dominant force in the world, has been absolutely destroying. Like, and now you're just sort of devolving, dude. Like, you're not really even engaging. No, dude, come on. Dear God. Like, what do you got? Near as I can tell, dude, you don't really know anything. Like, you're living in a little bubble. Things are okay for you. Right? And that's it. That's all you care about. That's basically what I'm seeing here. Is that things are okay for you. And so you don't see any reason to maybe do a minor reform. Like, maybe in a minor reform. Like, for real. Like, what you are calling for is basically tiny little moderate reforms. Because you don't actually have a serious analysis of your society. Right? You don't actually really know what it is your country gets up to. Like, you're not really aware of the long history of imperialism. Like the long history of imperialism that exists within your country, that still exists, that your country is still doing. Right? And this is like classic liberalism, right? That things are going okay for me, and so I don't need to rock the apple cart. I don't need to do any of that kind of stuff. Like, just small, tiny, little reformist ideas are good enough for me because things are fine for me. Well, not good enough. I began by asking if correcting the problems within capital was a reasonable alternative to try jumping straight to common. No, and I'll tell you why. Because even if you're successful at getting your little reforms, right? So take a look at the social democracies of Finland or these are usually what the social democrats point at, right? That, we want this. The only reason those social democracies exist is because of the threat of communism. Because capitalists are willing to... The only way that capitalists will actually give concessions is if they are threatened. If they are threatened. And the only way to threaten capitalists is with the removal of the means of production. Right? And so you threaten them with the removal of the means of production, and then they concede. They make concessions. This is what happened with the New Deal. This is what happens in Finland and Sweden and all these places, right? And and so you'll get your concessions in the short term, but they won't stick. And the reason they won't stick is really simple, because the capitalists will reorganize and bribe the politicians they need to bribe because they purchase the political system with the wealth that they have, and push and then push those reforms out. You can see that happening here in Ontario right now. Doug Ford's privatizing the healthcare system here in Ontario right now. So if your solution is only small piecemeal reformism, then you're going to lose those reforms. Just how the New Deal reforms are being undone now. It might take a moment. It might take a little bit of time. But that's exactly what's happening. Yes, absolutely. That the social democracies, not Denmark as a nation, obviously, but the social democracies of Finland and Denmark, right? These places exist because of the Soviet Union, the threat of revolution that the Soviet Union posed. Countries were overthrowing capitalists, right? And so as a way to maintain their survival and their stability within their nations, the capitalists conceded. They gave concessions. They said, okay, we keep the means of production, but you can have this, that, and the other thing, and all the things that we say are great about the social democracies. They didn't get those things because the capitalists said, this is a good thing to do for the people, and we're going to help the people. No, they did it because there were people outside their door calling for revolution. So how do you combat the greed and corruption inherent in the execution of communism? Man, that's the most loaded question I've ever seen in my life. So what has convinced you about this greed and corruption inherent in the execution of communism? Is it the reduction in poverty? Is it the elimination of homelessness? Is it the increase in education, the increase in literacy that happens under communism? Like I'm a bit confused by the framing of your question in the first place. Like, what has convinced you that the greed and corruption is inherent in the execution of communism? Like what is it? Because that's kind of a startling thing to say from my perspective. Like, I see whenever I take a look at the communist societies, I see a society that genuinely is attempting to alleviate poverty, to build infrastructure, to eliminate homelessness, to educate its populace, to create a literate populace, and to create a safe populace. Like, and so where is this greed and corruption angle coming from, especially when compared to the like legalized, like literally lobbying is corruption. It's like built into the structure of the capitalist society. There's no comparison. It's not even close. It's not even close at all. Like, you want to talk about corruption. Like, politicians are literally bought. It's truly a utopian dream that we have evolved to a point where communism won't devolve into what it has always devolved into. Oh, yeah, here we go. Because the things the West and the things capitalists say about what happened in communist countries actually did happen. And certainly capitalists are not going to lie about what happened in communist nations, right? So are you talking about China? Is this Mao's Great Leap Forward? Is that what this is, Jason? Like, the dead 60 million people. Like, well, like, what event are you referring to with this? Is this Mao? Is this what we're talking about? But what makes it beautiful is that it's realizable. That the thing that has been holding it back has been this crazed, insane lunatic that has been absolutely destroying Yeah. Have you ever heard of the 100 million plus death as a result of capitalism, genocide of East Bengal, the slavery wars? Yeah. And like this 60 million people. Like, I just want to know what are you talking about? Like, what event are you referring to? 60 million people is a lot of people, right? A lot of people. There must be some academic somewhere who's written on the subject, right? It's certainly not the case that they just say it, right? Certainly can't be the case that capitalists just say that. It's got to be that there's actually published intellectuals and published academics in places like Harvard or Oxford who have actually studied this and actually have seriously credentialized and found strong evidence that this actually occurred, right? It can't just possibly be the case that capitalists just say this, right? That's crazy. What a crazy idea. Just making up like 60 million people dying. Wow. That'd be nuts, right? I mean, the 60 million number, that's why I keep asking for the event. Like, what event are you referring to with that number? Seems like it's gotta be the Great Leap Forward. Like, the more you think about it, the dumber it gets. Like, really. Just sit with me right now, Jason. And really think about this for a minute. Really think about it. 60 million people died in China. $60 million. Mao's Great Leap Forward happened in the 50s. Population of China in 1950. So what is that? It's like not a tenth of the population, a little over a tenth of the population. 12? Let's just say 10. So 10%. 10% of the population of China. It's worse than the Black Plague. That's worse than the Gulag Archipelago, a fictional document, right? Yeah. We're really marching into Jordan Peterson territory now. The Gulag Archipelago is a work of fiction, like literally a work of fiction. Like, you might as well be citing Animal Farm right now. Like, oh no, the Russians had prisons. Like, this is how easy this is to defang this stuff, right? Okay, so yeah, it's a big number. So you want to double down on it. Oh, okay. So 10% of the Chinese population died. Where's the refugee crisis? Where's a photo? Where's a single individual who witnessed it? Where's the China watchers while it was happening, talking about it? Where's the academics who study China, writing about it at the time? This is a major event. 60 million people is a huge event. Massive. Absolutely massive. Overwhelming event. "30 years ago, a highly successful vilification campaign was launched against Mao Zedong, saying that it was a massive famine in which 27 to 30 million people died in China took place during the Great Leap period, 1958 to 1961, which marked the formation of the people's communities or communes under his leadership. The main basis of this assertion was, first, the population deficit in China during the 1958 to 1961, and second, the work of two North American demographers, A.J. Cole and Judith Bannister. No one bothered to look at the highly dubious method through which these demographers had arrived at their apocalyptic figures." It's an article written by Utsa Patnaik, an Indian Marxist in the Indian universities. The estimate was later widely publicized by Amartya K. Sen, who built an entire theory saying that democratic freedom, especially press freedom, in India meant that famine was avoided, while its absence in China explains why the world did not know that such a massive famine had taken place until as much as a quarter century later, when the North American demographers painstakingly uncovered it. The capitalist press was happy to reciprocate the compliment by repeatedly writing of 30 million famine deaths to the extent that a fiction was established as historical fact in readers' minds. The London Economist had a special issue on China some years ago, which repeated the allegation of 30 million deaths in 3 separate articles and refused to publish the letter to the editor this author sent contradicting the claim. More recently, in his introduction to the book Mao Zedong on Practice and Contradiction, which he edited and published in 2006, Slavoj Žižek also mentioned the figure of 30 millions, as though it were a given fact. Well-known intellectuals have to be taken seriously, and the claim examined. There are 2 routes through which very large famine deaths have been claimed. Firstly, population deficit, and secondly, inputting births and deaths which did not actually take place. Looking at China's official population data from its 1953 and 1964 census, we see that if the rate of population increase up to 1958 had been maintained, the population should have been 27 million higher over the period of 1959 to 1961 than it actually was. This population deficit is also discussed by the demographers Pravin Visaria and Leela Visaria, The population deficit was widely equated with famine deaths, but 18 million of the people alleged to have died in a famine were not born in the first place. The decline in the birth rate from 29 in 1958 to 18 in 1961 is being counted as famine deaths. The Chinese are a highly talented people, but they have not learned the art of dying without being born. There is a basic responsibility that everyone, and more particularly academics, has to be clear and precise about. To say or write that 27 million people died in a famine in China conveys to the reader that people who were actually present and alive starved to death. But this did not actually happen, and the statement that it did is false. China had lowered its death rate sharply from 20 to 12 per thousand between 1953 and 1958. India did not reach the latter level until over a quarter century later. After the radical land reforms and the formation of rural cooperatives, there were mass campaigns to clean up the environment and do away with disease-bearing pests, while a basic rural healthcare system was put in place. That a dramatic reduction in the rural death rate was achieved is not disputed by anyone. During the early commune formation from 1958, there was a massive mobilization of peasants for a stupendous construction effort, which completely altered for a few years the normal patterns of peasant family life. Women were drawn into the workforce, communal kitchens were established, and children looked after in crutches, as most of the able-bodied population moved to irrigation and other work sites during the slack season. We find a graphic description of this period of mass mobilization in William Hinsford's Shen Fan. When this author spent 3 weeks in China in 1983, visiting several communes, which still existed at that time, she was told every time that we built our water conservation system during the Great Leap. The birth rate fell from 1959 had to do with labor mobilization and not low nutrition, since the 1958 food grain output was exceptionally good at 200 million tons. There was excess mortality compared to the 1958 level over the next 3 years of a much smaller order. Let us be clear on the basic facts about what did happen. There was a run of 3 years of bad harvests in China. Drought in some parts, floods in others, and pest attacks. Food grain output fell from 1958, good harvest of about 200 MT to 170 MT in 1959, and further to 143.5 in 1960, with 1961 registering a small recovery to 147 million tons. This was a one-third decline, larger than the one-quarter decline India saw during its mid-1960s drought and food crisis. Grain output drop coincided in time with the formation of the communes, and this lent itself to a fallacious causal link being argued by the academics who were inclined to do so, and they blamed the commune formation for the output decline. One can more plausibly argue precisely the opposite, that without the egalitarian distribution that the communes practiced, the impact on people of the output decline, which arose for independent reasons, and would have taken place anyway, would have been far worse. Further, without the 46,000 reservoirs built with collective labor on the communes up to 1980, the effects of later droughts would have been very severe. Recovery to the 200 million ton level took place only by 1965. Throughout, however, the per capita food grain output in China, even during the worst year, 1960, remained substantially above that in India. As output declined from 1959, there was a rise in the officially measured death rate, from 12 in 1958 to 14.6 in 1959, followed by a sharp rise in 1960 to 25.4 per thousand, following the next year to 14.2, and further to 10 in 1962. While clearly 1960 was an abnormal year with about 8 million deaths in excess of the 1958 level, note that this peak official famine death rate of 25.4 per thousand in China was a little different from India's 24.8 death rate in the same year, which was considered quite normal and attracted no criticism. If we take the remarkably low death rate of 12 per thousand that China had achieved by 1958 as the benchmark, and calculated the deaths in excess of this over the period of 1959 to 1961, it totals 11.5 million. This is the maximal estimate of possible famine deaths. Even this order of excess deaths is puzzling, given the egalitarian distribution in China, since its average grain output per head was considerably above India's level, even in the worst year, and India saw no generalized famine in the mid-1960s. Relative to China's population, this figure of plausible excess mortality is low, and it did not satisfy the academics in northern universities who had always strongly opposed to socialized production. Coles and Bannister's estimates gave them the ammunition they were looking for to attack the communes. How exactly do Cole and Bannister reach a figure of famine deaths which is 3 times higher than the maximal plausible estimate? Examining carefully how they arrive at 30 million famine deaths estimate, we find that the figure was manufactured by using indefensible assumptions and has no scholarly basis. In the 1982 census, there was a survey on fertility covering 1 million persons, or a mere 0.1% sample of the population, who were asked about births and deaths from the early 1950s onwards. The very high total fertility rate obtained from this 1982 survey is used by them to say that millions more were actually born between the 2 census years, 1953 and 1964, than were officially recorded. They ignore the birth rate of 37 per thousand derived from very much larger 1953 sample, which had covered 5% of all households and was especially designed to collect the information on births and deaths used in the official estimates. Instead, they input birth rates of 43 to 44 per thousand to the 1950s, using the 1982 survey. There is no justification for such an arbitrary procedure of using a much later reported high fertility rate for a long distant past. We know that a distant recall period makes responses inaccurate. These inputted births between 1953 and 1964 total a massive 50 million, but according to them did not increase by an iota the 1964 population total, 694.6 million, the official figure which they assume is correct. Thus, although all official birth and death rates are rejected by them, the official population totals are accepted. This opportunistic assumption is clearly necessary for their purpose, because it allows them to assert that the same number of extra people died between 1953 and 1964, as the extra people they claim were born. But the demographers are still not satisfied with the 50 million extra births and deaths that they have conjured up. Fitting a linear time trend to the falling death rate of the early 50s is done to say that deaths should have continued to decline steeply after 1958, and since it did not, the difference from the trend meant additional famine deaths. Such straight-line trend fitting is a senseless procedure, since the death rate necessarily shows non-linear behavior. It cannot continue falling at the same steep rate. It has to flatten out, and cannot reach zero in any population. Not even the inimitable Chinese people could hope to become immortal. The final estimate of extra deaths in both authors is raised thereby to a massive 60 million, a heroic 65% higher than the official total deaths over the intercessal period. Having created these 60 million extra deaths at their own sweet will out of nothing, the authors then proceed to allocate them over the years to 1953 to 1964, arbitrarily attributing a higher portion to the Great Leap years in particular. The arbitrariness is clear from the variation in their own manipulations of the figures. Cole's allocation raises his peak death rate in 1960 to 38.8 per thousand, while Bannister is bolder and raises it to 44.6 compared to the official 25.4 for that year. And 30 million famine deaths are claimed over Great Leap years after this smart legerdemain. Having violated every tenet of reason, these academics may as well have allocated all their imaginary deaths to the Great Leap years and claimed that 60 million died. Why hang themselves only for a lamb rather than for a sheep? Seldom have we seen basic norms of academic probity and honesty being more blatantly violated than this travesty of statistical estimates, and seldom have noted intellectuals, who might have been expected to show more common sense, shown instead more credulous naivety and irresponsibility, by accepting without investigation and propagating such nonsensical estimates, giving them the status of historical fact. In the process, they have libeled and continue to libel Mao Zedong, a great patriot and revolutionary. They have unwittingly confirmed the principle attributed to Goebbels, that a lie has to be a really big lie and be endlessly repeated, then it is bound to be believed. 30 million or 3 crores is not a small figure. When 1 million people died in Britain's colony, Ireland, in 1846 and 47, the world knew about it. When 3 million people died in the 1943-44 Bengal famine, the fact that a famine occurred was known. Yet 30 million people are supposed to have died in China without anyone knowing at the time that a famine took place. The reason no one knew about it is simple. For a massive famine did not take place at all. The intellectuals who quote the massive famine deaths figure of 30 million today are no doubt outstandingly clever in the small im kleinen, but are proving themselves to be rather foolish im grossen, in the large. A person has to be very foolhardy indeed to say that 30 million people died in a famine without anyone, including foreign diplomats in China and the China watchers abroad, having the slightest inkling of it. And those who credulously believe this claim and uncritically repeat it show an even greater folly than the originators of the claim. Utsa Patniak is a Marxist economist in India. This article was first published in People's Democracy on the 26th of June, 2011. It is reproduced here for non-profit educational purposes. Our boy left? Yeah, as soon as the evidence shows up, right? As soon as the evidence shows up. Yep, went back to watching Debate Bro vids, right? As soon as the evidence shows up. Yep. Dips right when the evidence shows up. Yep. Going back to watching Jordan Peterson. Yeah, you see it here first, folks. Chuds are not interested in the truth. Like, they don't care. Like, flat earthers don't care. Like, the second the evidence shows up, they leave. Right? They want to come in, spread the flat earth ideology, and leave. What do we just see? Like, this is the reason why I don't do this Debate Bro shit. Like, they're not interested in evidence. They're not interested in facts. They're not interested. Oh, absolutely, dude. Like, when are we going to get, as a people, that we are extremely, extremely unserious? Like, extremely, 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 extremely unserious as a people. Like, what did we literally just see here? We just saw, like, a very unserious person come in, spread around the Peterson bullshit, right? Get completely owned by basic facts. Like, basic facts. Like, and the reason why guys like this cannot confront, like, an article like this is because if this is a lie, then there is no other thing that you can actually trust. Like, this is such an enormous lie that is well embedded in the consciousness of America. Like, it's just assumed to be true that Mao Zedong famine 30 million people, 60 million people, 100 million people, right? Like, the National Post, literally the National Post reported the figure at 100 million people. Like, I made a video about it. And why this is so dangerous and why this particularly is so dangerous, is because once you confront a fundamentalist with irrefutable evidence in one aspect of their belief, then the whole thing comes apart. Like, this guy was a pro-capitalist fundamentalist. Like, he was just completely fine with capitalists being a slave system, and that's the way it is, right? Like, just all the Peterson shit. And if you're when I was a fundamentalist, when I was a Christian fundamentalist, one of the things that really broke it open for me, one of the things that really made the whole thing start to fall apart, was the homosexual conversation. That it was built into the ethos that I grew up with, that homosexuality was a sin and it was wrong. And I went to university and I was in theater. So I was interacting all the time with homosexual people. All the time. They were always around, constantly. And looking back on it, they were wonderful people. My regret is that I was so stuck in my Christian fundamentalism that I lost them as friends. That I could have had many good relationships and many good friends had I not been burdened by this fundamentalist Christianity. And by the time I came to Toronto and was pursuing theater here in Toronto, I finally came to the realization that it's just not possible that this is wrong. That the science is out. It's not a choice. They're not like choosing to affront. Why would God create a gay person and then condemn them as a sinner? It didn't make any sense. And the whole it was God's will and God works in mysterious ways is simply not good enough. Like, it's just simply not good enough. It revealed an incoherence in the dogma and in the doctrine. And as soon as one incoherence is revealed to a fundamentalist, then all of the incoherencies become more evident and more obvious. And then there's a cascading effect that occurs after that. Because once the fundamentalists can acknowledge one incoherence in the belief system, then the fundamentalists can begin to acknowledge many incoherencies and begin to see those incoherencies more readily. And the entire thing unravels very, very, very quickly. Very, very quickly. I would say that I went from still believing that I was a fundamentalist and still arguing from the fundamentalist position to no longer being a fundamentalist in the space of a year. That was the unraveling that occurred. But to get to that point where the unraveling occurred was a very long process. A very long process. And looking back on it, I wish it hadn't been so difficult. And anybody who ever wants to convince me that education is exclusively to get a vocation, like, I feel like my story, like, my education was instrumental on me no longer believing in fundamentalist Christianity, which I consider to be an enormous net positive for the society. That we would be much better off without these fundamentalist Christians in our society. But and something like this, like a fundamentalist capitalist, like we just encountered, who believes in a religious ideology, and it's an ideology of a death cult, without a doubt, being confronted with this, like, it's a huge incoherency in the belief system. Like, it's a massive revelation of an enormous lie. That really shows sort of the dark underbelly. I think I'm done for the night, guys. I gotta get up early. I'm doing an open tomorrow because I'm covering somebody. Always remember, each and every one of you is a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just keep being the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.